IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We are live here on a Thursday, which means, of course, it's keys to victory. Notre Dame versus the Pitt Panthers this weekend, coming off of a bye week. Big game for Notre Dame. They have gained a lot of momentum, obviously, this past game 2 weeks ago, defeating the University of Southern California Trojans. I know they hate that, so we're going to keep working with that shtick. Defeating them, going into the bye week, and now really have a momentum coming out, and you have a chance now to start a 4-game stretch where, full transparency, Notre Dame should win every game down the stretch. Now, should and will are two very different things, but Notre Dame should have a massive opportunity here to end the season the way that we really want them to, and the way that they need to in order to really capture all the momentum going into bowl season, into the off season, and we've really talked about that a lot over the last 2 weeks here. But Brian, getting into this Pittsburgh game, we're talking keys to victory. We'll talk offensively. We'll talk defensively. Of course, we'll talk about score predictions. We'll also have a mailbag at the end. So if there's any mailbag questions, please put mailbag before the question, MB for short, if you would like. That really helps us quickly determine what is a mailbag question and what is just general chatter that is happening in the chats during this podcast. So Brian, it's an interesting one. It's a very unique game, in my opinion. This is a Pitt Panther team, before we dive into both sides of football and keys to victory. It's a very traditional team in the sense they are built off of all the same principles, playing good defense, wanting to run the football, working off of play action. They're still built the same under Pat Narduzzi, obviously. But this is a team that there are clearly some holes, clearly some places that Notre Dame can take advantage of, but a big game nonetheless. And Notre Dame has had some tough games against Pitt over the years. They've had a couple blowouts as well in there, but Pitt's always been kind of that pesky team that can stick around if you let them.
Well, I mean, and they're a team that has been dealing with injuries this season too, Ryan. You've talked about the offensive line. I know they have a tackle down. They have a new center whose first start, I think, was the Virginia Tech game. They've been missing. I know Devonshire missed that game as well. The D tackle, or not the Danielson, corner. Excuse me, the D tackle. No, the Devonshire's the corner. Danielson's the player that missed. The D tackle's the guy that missed that game. You know, Phil Jerkovic got banged up, and he eventually got replaced. I was watching breaking down the Virginia Tech game. Bub Means has a 75-yard touchdown pass in that game, like second series, and then gets hurt. You know, it's just been like one of those years. So a team that was already not as talented as recent teams has been then banged up and has lost players, and that's played a big role in why they're struggling. But Ryan, as you know, when you have injuries early, eventually the guys that step in now have more and more experience, and that team is at times can improve and play better. We'll find out if that's going to be Pitt, because to your point, Ryan, this is a team that in the past has given Notre Dame some tough games, and now the last couple have not, two of the last three have not been overly close. Notre Dame won 45-3 in 2020, a game that was close until the final 5 minutes of the second quarter. Notre Dame got a pick that set up a touchdown. Isaiah Foskey blocked a punt that set up a touchdown. Like all of a sudden, a 14-3 game that was basically built around like two long passes to Ben Skoranek, which remember that because we're going to talk about that. All of a sudden turns into a 28-3 game. And, Pitt didn't have their starting quarterback. Kenny Pickett was hurt that game. He didn't play that game. 2018 they played, Ryan, and that was a very mediocre Pitt team. I think they went like 7-7 that year. I think it was the year that they played for the ACC championship at like 7-7, if I remember correctly. But it wasn't a very good Pitt team. And Notre Dame needed a fourth quarter. That was an undefeated, playoff-bound Pitt team that Notre Dame needed to rally back and win in the fourth quarter against a team that got blown out by Penn State 51-6, lost to North Carolina that year, who wasn't that good, lost to UCF that year. Let me rephrase that. They got blown out by UCF that year. And by the way, as I said, they lost to North Carolina. Carolina went 2-9 that season. They lost to Miami by 21. They got blown out by Clemson. And then, of course, they give Notre Dame everything they can handle. Why? Because Notre Dame was sloppy. They weren't focused. You had first drive of the game, Pitt goes 3 and out, you think, and then you jump off sides on a 4th down punt. Nico Fertitta jumped off sides, and then Pitt takes that drive and they go all the way down the field. I think Quadri Ellison scores. And then it was kind of like that the rest of the game. You know, you had Ian Book through a couple interceptions in Pitt territory, and it was just like, what are they doing? Like they looked at this Pitt team that had just gotten blown out by UCF, had lost to a bad North Carolina team, had got blown out by UCF. Pitt at the time was 3-3 coming into the game, and Notre Dame was like, "Yeah, we're good. We're a really good football team. We're going to come out and roll the balls out and blow this team out." Notre Dame was coming off of a really convincing road win over Virginia Tech the week before, a ranked Virginia Tech team. They had blown out Stanford. They had blown out Wake Forest. They'd beaten Michigan. Like, they were feeling really good about themselves. And if it wasn't Ian Book completing like 9 of his last 10 passes, including a post route to Miles Boykin, that could have been an upset. And that's kind of been the story with Notre Dame and Pitt. And a lot of times, Ryan, is, even when Notre Dame's really good and Pitt's not that good, they just seem to have Notre Dame's number. 2012. Right. It's another year where Notre Dame's got a great football team. They're they're undefeated. They've beat some really big time programs. And who gave Notre Dame the biggest scare that season? It was Pitt. I was at that game, right? I was in the stands because I was coaching at the time. And so Ange and I, we had a bye week. And so Ange got me tickets to the game, and we went to the game. And I'm thinking, it's going to be great. Going to get to watch them blow out Pitt, because I like when they blow out Pitt, because I lived in Pittsburgh. And let's just say, if I never hear the word yins again, or you know what I mean, I'll be a happy camper. You know what I mean? But
you can't get as many steel girders where you live now as you could back there. So
this is true. This is true. And that was a Pitt team at the time, Ryan, that was 4-4. Again, not a very good Pitt team. They had lost to Syracuse that year, lost to Louisville, got blown out by Cincinnati, lost by 2 touchdowns to Youngstown State. Right? Notre Dame feeling good about themselves. We're going to blow them out. They're not very good. And it was a ball game. I think they were down like 17-6 at one point in time. So this is not a team that you can just assume that the Notre Dame's going to blow them out. The players can't. They've got to come in locked in for this game, Ryan, because this is a season-saving opportunity for Pitt. Because when you look at their schedule, Ryan, they're 2-5 right now. They can only lose one more game and to be bowl eligible. And they've got Notre Dame, Florida State, Syracuse on a neutral field, Boston College, and Duke on the road left the rest of the way. Yeah. So their backs are against the wall. All
those games are losable for them too, man. They could lose every one of those games potentially.
All of them. And so this is their guys. We've got to. It's now or never. We got to turn our season around. So my point is, Notre Dame should not only win their last 4 games, Ryan. I would argue that at least 3 of them should be convincing wins, including this. But what it should, like you said, what it should be and what it will be, that's a much bigger question. And so Notre Dame's going to have to come out, and that's going to be the biggest thing, Ryan. Like, we're going to get in the keys to victory here in a minute. But the biggest overall key is come in locked in. You still have something to prove. This isn't about Pitt. This isn't about their record 2-5. This is about you and the fact that you still have something to prove. You got your rest. No midterms this week. No excuses. This is as healthy as you've been since probably the Central Michigan game. You've got to be locked in. That's the biggest key to success, because that's what's hurt Notre Dame in those past games. Things that got Notre Dame to the point where in 2012 they were undefeated with wins over Stanford and I believe Miami at that point in time, and Oklahoma and Michigan State. All the things that got you there, you weren't doing in the first half against Pitt in that game. You weren't stopping the run. You were making mistakes. All the things that had got you to be undefeated in victory over Michigan, a blowout win over at the time a top 10 Stanford team, a blowout win over Wake, a blowout road win over a ranked Virginia Tech team, you weren't doing against Pitt in that game, and you needed that fourth quarter comeback. Silly penalties and things like that. That's what a team that just thinks they're going to roll the balls out and run over a team does. And this Notre Dame team can't do that. And that's going to be overall, all phases of the game, coaching, player-wise, offense, defense, special teams, all of it. That's the biggest key to this game is come out, locked in, and play Notre Dame football. You do that, it's going to be a not just a win, but a convincing win. If you
Yep.
don't, and you just think you're just going to go out there and Pitt's going to roll over, you're going to be in for a battle that shouldn't be a battle. I'm just being honest, Ryan. Like,
Yeah.
we could spin it and like, this is a tough team. Yeah, they are a tough team. They are well coached on defense, but they're not good. They're just not good. But Notre Dame needs to handle their business and prove it. Because just ask North Carolina what can happen when you play a really bad team and you don't take them seriously,
Yep.
right?
I feel like I'm having a battle in my mind, man, because I agree with you. Notre Dame should win this game convincingly, but then I get I get this sense of like, but man, what if they come out flat? And this Pitt team is like, again, yeah, they're not good, but like they are tough. And when you come out flat and maybe you're just a little bit of ahead of yourself or maybe a little bit too high on yourself coming into a game, that energy has kind of went a little bit too far north. Then a team like Pitt is just going to feast off of that and just be that scrappy, stupid victory that we hate, that we do not enjoy, especially coming off of a bye week, coming off of a huge game. I mean, there are two realities that I think exist here. But Brian, I think that the side of the football that will have my most attention because of the simple fact that my skepticism side, my skeptic side, is based upon the Notre Dame offense right now. That's where it comes from. Full transparency. That is where this guy comes from. And we'll talk about the keys to victory here, Brian. But I think the first one is very well illustrated by this simple fact. Notre Dame defeated USC 2 weeks ago, 48-20 in dominant fashion. You beat your rival by 4 touchdowns at home. You're feeling great about yourself. In that football game, though, we always talk about sustainability. Notre Dame's offense was better than it had been, but it still wasn't great, right? It did what it had to do, but it still showed there's still evolution that needs to happen here. There's still an identity issue. You still need to get a whole lot better. So for us, first key to victory today, and I think that this is exemplified here for the Notre Dame offense, you have to start fast. Why? Because there's a few different reasons here. The biggest one for me, though, is that you are riding momentum coming out of the bye week. As a team, you should be feeling pretty good about yourself. You just embarrassed a top 10 team in your home stadium, 48-20, got into a bye week, got some rest, and now you get an inferior football team at home again to start a 4-game stretch of games that you should win. Notre Dame should have a lot of energy and a lot of positivity coming into this football game. And every time you have momentum, you have to hold on to that thing, man. You have to keep it the best way you can. And for the Notre Dame offense, you need to start fast in this football game. And we'll get into exactly what that means, what we think that they need to show early on in this football game to show that there has been a corner that has been turned, hopefully. But more than anything, Brian, this offense, this team feeling pretty good about themselves. Offensively, you need to capture some of that momentum and really urge it forward for the next 4 games, and specifically this weekend against Pitt.
Ryan, there are so many aspects to why starting fast is important in this game. Some of them practical to the Pitt game, some of them more about Notre Dame, like you just mentioned. Like, a lot of what you were just talking about is more like big picture, more just mental, more emotional, as opposed to the strategic reasons why it matters to Pitt. But that's the biggest thing about this game for me, Ryan. It's not really about Pitt; it's about Notre Dame.
It is,
and where's your head at? Like you said, feeling good. Well, feeling good can go one of two ways. One is I'm feeling pretty good about myself, and Pitt's not any good, and we're Notre Dame, and we're just going to come in and roll the balls out, and they're going to lay over and die. And that's the wrong kind of feeling good. The other kind of feeling good is, hey, I like this feeling of blowing teams out, and we just showed how good we are. We're not the team that looked like that against Louisville. We're not the team that struggled to beat Duke. We're this team. We're this team that can go out and dominate people. That's the other way of feeling good. And that's where momentum gets built, Ryan, to your point. Because if you come out and just slug out an ugly win over Pitt, yeah, it's good. It's a win. I mean, you're 7-2. That's fine, whatever. But I'm not going to feel good about that. I'm not going to feel good about Notre Dame having a slugfest 17-13 victory over a Pitt team that's gotten blown out by Virginia Tech and North Carolina, lost by 11 to West Virginia, lost to a really bad Cincinnati team at home, and then just went on the road and lost to Wake Forest third-string quarterback. I mean, Cincinnati this year, Ryan, has 2 wins, Eastern Kentucky and Pitt at Pitt. That's it. They've lost to Miami of Ohio, Oklahoma,
who's the second win? Who's the second one? You
Eastern
said Pitt at.
Kentucky. And then they
What was the
beat Pitt
second game?
at Pitt. That's the
Pitt
second
beat
win.
Pitt?
No.
Beat
For
Pitt?
Cincinnati.
Oh, for Cincinnati. Oh, I'm sorry.
only
Okay,
has 2
I
wins.
misheard what
Yeah,
you said. I got it. Okay.
No, you're all good. I might have said Pitt, but I'm just talking about the low quality teams that have beat Pitt. It's not like they've had this gauntlet of they've lost to North Carolina, Clemson, Florida State, and Duke so far this year. And then, hey, I mean, they're 2-5, but they've played some really good football teams so far this year. Nope, they lost at home to a Pitt they lost at. I'm gonna say it again. Pitt lost at home to a Cincinnati team that the following week lost at home to Miami of Ohio. Now, that's not meant to be a slight to Miami of Ohio because Chuck Martin's doing a really nice job with that team this year. They're 6-2 right now. Their only losses are to Miami, Florida, and a really good Toledo team.
Yep.
But you're Pitt. You shouldn't be losing at home to Miami of Ohio. Or I don't care how good Miami of Ohio is. So, this is just not a game, Ryan, where I'm going to feel good about Notre Dame just kind of sleepwalking through a win. And that's how momentum gets stalled, right? Because all the confidence you built during that week of beating USC in the bye week can be eliminated with that kind of game. I want to see this team come out fired up. Now, practically speaking about Pitt, the other part of it too is, Ryan, is like we said, Pitt is going to come in and they've got nothing to lose at all. They're trying to save their season. And you come out right away and just boom, 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 take it right down the field, get the ball back from your defense, boom, 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 right down the field, score a touchdown. Now all of a sudden Pitt's like, we're done. Here we go again. We can't win this game. So it's also practical from that standpoint. So not only build it, continue to build up your confidence, because there are parts of this Notre Dame team that still need their confidence built up. Even though as a team you feel good, there's other parts of the team that we'll get into, O-line, receiver, things like that, that still need a confidence boost, and you need to be able to come out and do that early on. And so in order for Notre Dame to get a fast start, Ryan, I believe the O-line and the wide receivers have to be a big part of that, which we'll kind of dive into these next few points. So that's the other part, is the only way Notre Dame can start fast on offense is if part of the team that's been struggling lately is playing well against a pretty, like, as bad as Pitt is, they have a pretty salty defense. They do. They're well coached. Always. They've got some quality players, and it's not a vintage Pitt defense with 4, 5, 6 NFL guys on it, but it's still a quality unit. And Notre Dame's going to have to come out and play well. So starting fast, big picture, macro, micro, starting fast is a big part of this game. Yes, Notre Dame can win the game without starting fast, but I don't know that they can accomplish the ultimate goal of really moving the needle forward as a team, not as a program, just as a team in 2023, without coming out and really getting that early momentum, you should be juiced, man. You're rested, get some time off. You should be pretty fired up.
Well, and I think that if we're just looking at this 2023 version of Notre Dame as well, if Notre Dame is the resilient team that we have been portraying them as being, which they've proven a couple times so far this year. Most recently against USC, obviously coming off of a tough loss and dismantling the number 10 team in the country. I think that for me, this is the next step of now, after a big win, coming off a bye week, can this coaching staff now get a team ready and be like, dude, Pitt doesn't even deserve to be here with you guys. Like, let's go destroy them and make this not even a contest. Like, could this be a game where in the middle of the second quarter, you're just like, dude, this thing's over with. Like, it's over.
Right.
Like even if we go stale the rest of the game, they're still not going to get close to beating us. Like, it's just one of those games, So I think this could be a little bit of a statement win, not in the traditional sense of like you destroyed a really good team, but a statement win in the sense of, hey, we have the momentum, and I'm going to show as a coaching staff and as a program that we can hold the momentum and that we can stomp on the teams that we need to stomp on. That's a little bit of a statement win, in my opinion, which I think is needed. Very
big time. Big time. And Ryan, look, I'm not trying to have a college football playoff conversation right now because a lot would have to happen. Yeah. But just from a perception standpoint, whether it's New Year's 6, whether it's, you've got to get to New Year's 6, you've got to climb up the rankings. You're not going to be able to do that by beating a big team, a big time team. You're not going to have any ranked opponents on your schedule. Even if Clemson beats Wake Forest this weekend, NC State this weekend, they're not going to be ranked next weekend because of the Miami loss. It's the reality of it. So you don't
Yeah.
have that big name opponent you can beat. So what you have to do is you have to then go, man, Notre Dame is smashing people. I mean, just smashing people. And for that to happen, the offense is going to have to be a fast starting group. And it's always what we say, but as we
Yeah.
always also there's always different reasons why, and it looks different. And that's kind of where I'm at this week. Can Notre Dame win this game without starting fast? As we said, yes.
For sure.
But can
Yeah.
Notre Dame be the team down the stretch they need to be if they come out and just it's same old offensively? I don't know. That's going to make me a little
Okay.
bit nervous.
Well, obviously, the next 2 points, or number 2 and number 3 points, are a little bit interrelated, but they all kind of work off of each other. They're points that we know offensively, because we have very intelligent listeners out there, right? Like, for the most part, y'all know what the issues are, right? And one of the
Right.
biggest issues in some games, because some games the offensive line is very good, other games hasn't been very good. It's been kind of like polar opposites a lot. There hasn't been much middle ground either. There hasn't been many games where
Yeah.
you're just like, yeah, they were good, just
For
not great.
sure.
Like, usually it's really good or below average. Like, that's usually
Right.
the typical offensive line play we have. But Brian, like, this one is going to be big for the offensive line. One, because we want to see progression there, right? We want to see this team now start to figure it out, and whoever the starting five is moving forward, the rest of the season, I want them to start maturing and being a cohesive unit and getting a whole lot better. And in this game against Pitt, it's very important because, one, we're going to talk about, getting the passing game going a little bit, getting the perimeter working. And in order for that to happen, you need to protect Sam Hartman. And the other big part is you're Notre Dame. You're always going to be built off wanting to run the football. You got to get the run game going as well, which has kind of been stagnant, especially early on in some football games recently. So offensive line needs to play really well. And also, not to mention, I think MJ Devonshire at corner for Pitt might be their best football player defensively, but their best unit and deepest unit by far, in my opinion, is the defensive line. There's no
Mhm.
Aaron Donald. There's no Patrick Jones. There's none of those types of guys. There's no guys that you're going to watch on Sundays be difference makers. I don't see those types of players. But they have guys like Deion Hayes. You mentioned Devin Danielson earlier, who's just a really solid interior enforcer. You have guys like PJ, like Jules. I'm just calling him PJ Jules because that's a safety for Southern Illinois, but his name
Mhm.
is not PJ Jules.
DeAndre.
But you have
Yeah.
DeAndre Jules inside. This is just a very deep defensive line for Pitt. Again, no stalwarts, no guys that are superstars, no first round draft picks, but they can, when somebody comes off the field, they put in just another good quality football player into the game. This is a deep defensive line, and I really think that Notre Dame's offensive line is going to need to dominate this football game and get started off really early, because I think, as we know, the offense always works off of how well the offensive line is playing, especially Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, and how does that? Why is it important? Number one, obviously, you talked about the offensive, the run game's got to get going and all that. And that's been probably the even more disappointing for me the last 4 games. We're all obsessed with the pass game, and they're not throwing the ball, and the receivers this and receivers that. The reality is, Ryan, in the last 4 games, they're averaging about 126 yards a game. And if you take out the Ohio State game and just make the last 3 games, they're averaging barely 100 rushing yards a game the last 3 games. And it's not, oh, well, they just haven't run it much because they're not throwing the ball either. And you say, well, they had shorter fields. That's fine. But USC got ripped up against Arizona on the ground. They got ripped up by Utah on the ground. And right in the middle is an earning game where they were kind of okay running the football, right? And say, well, you only ran for 129 yards because of the short fields. I'm not worried about the yards. I'm worried about the fact you only went for about 5.1 yards per carry. If you take out the taking the knee, you're at about 5.4, 5.5 against a team that everybody else is going for like 6 and 6 plus. The good teams that you play, or at least 5.5 to 6 against them. So you've got to play well. But the big thing too is this is a team that wants to pressure the quarterback, and this is a team that wants to get after the quarterback. And the third key, Ryan, that ties in with this is you've got to get the ball down the field. We've talked about it. You've got to get the ball down the field. Well, Pitt's whole thing is we're going to play a style of defense that is going to leave us exposed to teams that can throw the ball down the field. But
Yep.
we don't think you're going to have the time to get the ball down the field because of the way we're going to pressure. That's what they're banking on. And if Notre Dame can like Virginia Tech early on, I thought did a pretty good job of protecting their quarterback. So, they go out and have a 70, or it was about a 50-something yard touchdown. The quarterback's hitting the ball over the middle of the field. He's hitting some big plays. Other games, their quarterbacks aren't getting as much time. and you're not able to get the ball down the field. And so to me, that's why these two things go together, because Notre Dame's got to get the ball outside. They got to get the ball outside with the deep, right? Go shots, deep out cuts, corner routes, deep in cuts. Like, they've got to get the ball down the field and outside. They've got to get the ball quickly outside. If you can catch them in a blitz and Sam Hartman can get that ball out on a now or a slide or a screen, you're going to have success there. Pitt's an interesting team because when they don't blitz, they're a very good screen defense. But if you catch them in a blitz, they have no answers for the screen. And that's just the nature of teams that bring the kind of pressure they bring. Now, that's much easier said than done, because unless you're stealing the other team's signs because you've been recording their entire season from the opposing sideline, you don't necessarily always know when they're bringing the blitz, right?
Nobody would ever do that, right? No
Just
one would ever
hypothetically speaking. So you've got to
Booger Picker. Just kidding.
Right. You've got to get the ball outside with quick run game stuff. I mean, there's just different things you need to do to get outside, but that's not going to work if your offensive line is not playing at a high level. So that's why these two things go together. Is your offensive line has to be a get right game for the offensive line. If they don't play well, Notre Dame is going to have a hard time putting this game away the way they need to. Yep. And so that's why these two things are together. If they do play well, I really like the outside matchups and the over the middle matchups. I think their safeties can be exposed in coverage. And you talked about MJ Devonshire being a good player. This is a kid he's got some strange stats, Ryan. He's holding opponents under 50% completion percentage, but he's giving up 18.7 yards per catch, because when people beat him, they beat him deep, right? Marquise Williams can absolutely be exposed. He's not very big and he's not very fast, right? Yes. I mean, it just that's just a matchup. Right.
Kid, that's all.
But when you're Notre Dame, that's a kid you've got to be taking advantage of, right? That's just the reality of it. So, to me, and then their safeties are downhill hitters, but they're not cover guys. I want them trying to have to cover Mitchell Evans down the field and Chris Tyree and Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison and the backs out. I want Shane Simon to please put Shane Simon in coverage on Jeremiah Love, please.
There's a reason that there are two safeties, Brian, on a team that only lets up only a little over 3 yards to carry as a run defense, or their two leading tacklers. It's because those kids want to get downhill. They want to get in the box. They want to get involved in the run game. They are not coverage safeties. You're absolutely correct. The corners, I would agree 1,000,000% on. MJ Devonshire, who I think is listed at like 5'11". I have an official verified measurable, though. He's only 5'10" and some change. He's not a big corner. Marquise Williams is also listed at only 5'9". You have two smaller corners. You know what gives them trouble? Size.
Yes.
The ability to win outside with leverage.
And speed.
Yes, and speed. Those things are all – there's ability to separate vertically, both with speed and size, is a possibility for Notre Dame this week. If there was ever a Tobias Merriweather breakout game this season, dude, this would be the game.
Ryan, I'm watching the Virginia Tech game, and I'm watching that Felton kid just run by Marquise Williams, and I'm like, this guy's not faster than the kids Notre Dame has at wide receiver. He's just not. And he just ran right by him. I mean, ran right by him. And we've seen that because this team is very prone to getting beat deep. And, Devonshire's longest catch allowed is 54 yards. Marquise Williams, it says 31. I actually think that's backwards. I thought it was Williams that got beat. No, it was Devonshire that just got ran past by – I even got that wrong. It was their good corner that got ran past by Felton against Virginia Tech. I thought it was Marquise Williams. But it's just a matchup where if you can't get your receivers going in this game – it's not in the cards this year, and they're going to need to play well. They're going to need to play well. So I want to see. I want to see.
You have an easy advantage outside from a talent perspective. Now, at this point, I will say this about those two kids is that both Devonshire and Marquise Williams are very tough kids. Right? They are not going to give up. They're going to scrap, and if they get into a catch point situation, they're going to scrap to try to force an incompletion. They are going to scrap. You are going to need to play physically. You're going to need to play demanding. And you're going to need to finish plays in this one. You're going to have to do those things. And could Notre Dame do that? Possibly. Have they given me any huge confidence that it's going to happen? Absolutely not. Not at this point. They have not. So this is a game where if there's ever a game where it's like, guys, we are challenging you this week, right? Those corners, you have advantage, both size-wise and athleticism-wise. You got to make some plays this week. If there's ever a game to do that, I think it's this one. But you're right.
Yeah.
It all starts protection, getting the run game going, and then you have to show that the biggest negative to your offense right now, winning outside the numbers, winning outside consistently, you need to show that you can do that this week.
Yeah.
You have to, because that's going to be an indicator of growth going down the stretch of the season.
Ryan, I believe it was you the other day that talked about this. It could have been Vince on Monday, but the conversation was, sometimes you need to run the ball early to set up the pass, or you're just a running team. That's who you are. Sometimes, though, you need to come out and get the pass game going in order to take some of the pressure off the run game. I believe, and I know that you and I have talked about this, so I know we're on the same page. This is one of those games where the pass game has to come out and get going early to take some of the pressure off the run game. It is. Can they win this game without that happening? Sure. They can win this game 21-6 because the Notre Dame defense shuts down the Pitt offense. But that doesn't move the needle. So this is one of those weeks where if I'm Jared Parker and I'm Marcus Freeman, I'm sitting down with Chancey Stuckey saying, we need your guys to step up. They're healthy. You need to get this kid going. You need to get this kid going. We need to be better here. We need to have better release moves. And because this is the kind of Pitt team, too, that if you use the kind of release moves I've seen this unit use in practice, if you hit a couple outside balls, next thing you know, Ryan, you're hitting slants, you're hitting in cuts because they'll overreact to that stuff. And that's why it's important for them to really get this thing rocking and rolling. So we'll see. Agree. And then we can go on to point 4.
Point 4, third down success. This has been a big negative of Notre Dame over the last few weeks. They've not been very good on
sides of the ball. Downs. It's been really weird. Both sides of the ball.
Very strange. And you would think, and again, this is not all on Sam Hartman. There are several issues on this offense right now, but a 6-year starting quarterback is a guy that you would expect to help a third down offense very easily, right? With a guy that can throw the football and open things up a little bit, and in theory, open the field up to different possibilities. That's where third down success is. That's where it takes the next step, right? But they've not been great running the football on third down. They've not been great converting third downs in general. And this is a Pitt team, again, defensive line-wise, no stars, but they have enough pieces where they can be a little bit annoying with you, right? They can be kind of that really just annoying team that gets some pressure on the quarterback. You're going to see a couple different blitz looks at times on this defense. Not incredibly exotic, but they're going to give you some issues if you let them, right? So I think more than anything, Brian, it's like, one, let's get into manageable third down situations first and foremost. But from there, man, you have to be able to convert against this team because they're going to put those corners on an island. They're going to try to pressure you, and they're going to try to force you into bad situations on the money downs of this football game.
This is Pitt's MO, Ryan.
Yep.
Shut down the run game, take away quick game, create enough stop negatives, and by negatives I mean really just stuffs, period. I'll just use stuffs. That's probably a better term, which incorporates 2-yard gains, zeros, incompletions, and negatives, and get teams on third down and then heat them up. That's their goal. That third and long and heat them up. Notre Dame can't put themselves in that situation. So early downs are going to be key to success here. But then the other part of it is you've got to have a better third down plan. And that's been an issue at times this year, Ryan, is there have been games you're just like, I don't know what their third down plan is. And then sometimes you're like, I know what they're trying to do, but it just wasn't smart. I thought the USC third down plan was actually pretty good. It just wasn't executed. You have the first third down, Sam Hartman doesn't take the one-on-one that's open. So next third down, Mitchell Evans drops a ball, he's open, he just drops it. So like there were some things there. And then like you said, it's Sam Hartman, but they haven't converted like 3rd and 2s. With the run game, they've been able to, like Ohio State, getting a 3rd and 2. You try to run the football, Aldrich hits the wrong hole. He doesn't bounce it properly. Next thing you know, you're at 4th and 1. Sam gets stopped on 4th and 1. Well, you should have never got the 4th and 1. because you needed to execute that 3rd and 2 better. The offensive line, it's been a team-wide problem. And I agree with you. I just kind of thought with Sam Hartman here, Wake had a pretty good 3rd down offense. I just assumed they'd be better on 3rd down. Notre Dame's been very good on 3rd down. That's going to have to get improved. And if you do that, all of a sudden the things start getting better and better and better. But that's where confidence comes from. But also 3rd down success leads to more and more plays. And the more plays you run, the more opportunities you have to hit a big one, right? I mean, we always talk about the more plays that there are, the more chance there is for failure. But also the more plays you run, the more chance you have to go hit a big play. And so those are the
3rd downs are always those high tension situations, right? Because I always coin it like this, Brian, like get a 1st down and breathe, right? Because I feel like for a 3rd down, like offenses just don't breathe. They're just like sitting there and just trying to prolong a drive to continue to really just gain momentum and to build on what you're doing offensively in a particular drive. You can breathe after a 1st down, after a 3rd down conversion. You can breathe a little bit. And I just really think it comes down to, one, you need to be more consistent just moving the football in general. You need to get into some 3rd and shorts, because those are always going to be a higher percentage of, I mean, it's not rocket science, right? The shorter the 3rd down conversion, more opportunity you are going to have to complete it, right? It's a lot easier to complete a 3rd and 3 or convert a 3rd and 3, than a 3rd and 15, for instance. Like, it just is like law of averages on that one, right? But I think also Notre Dame, I think they lack an identity on 3rd down a little bit too, right? Like, I don't think they always know exactly what they're good at all the time, right?
Because it's different week to week. It's like, oh, what are we going to try this week? Yes, that's a great point, Ryan. Continue it. But yes, that's a great point.
I was going to say, why do you run we used to call it counter crisscross, but it's not quite counter crisscross, but it's a wing counter to Chris Tyree on that 1 3rd down conversion, right? You're just like, why is that the play? Right? Like, why is that the play? It's the play because I think there's a lack of identity. I think that's what it is. I don't think that you 100% know what you're good at. Everybody makes fun of the Philadelphia Eagles right now, Brian, for like the quarterback sneak thing that they run. They call it like the tush push or whatever they're calling it now. It's like, guys, you can make fun of it all you want, but it always works. Like, it just works. You know why? Because they have an identity. They know what they're good at and they stick to it. And I think for offensively for Notre Dame, they haven't been able to convert 3rd and shorts a lot, which has been just very frustrating. Some misreads, some bad blocking schemes, a bunch of different things like that. Offensively, as a passing game too, like, you're just not creative all the times on 3rd downs and just getting easy. I mean, I'm seeing every week, man. It's not rocket science. There's a lot of teams now that are just motioning that guy inside, and then he runs straight outside, and it's like the flat's wide open because you're in man coverage, and it's an easy conversion, right? I mean, there's just no identity, I think, on this team right now, especially offensively.
And I'll say this: I think 3rd down has been a time where I feel as though Notre Dame's advanced scouting hasn't been all that good, because they're doing a lot of, stuff that just doesn't look like it's designed for that defense. They do a lot of things on 3rd down, Ryan, where it's just option routes, stop routes. And it's kind of like, I understand the need for that, especially against a zone defense. But when you're playing a team that's man, you've got to do more movement stuff. And you talk about moving guys pre-snap, but it's like, pivot routes, slide routes, nod and goes off options. And it would just seem like, okay, sometimes I think a team is going to be in zone on 3rd down. They come out and they're playing man. Well, eventually you have to adjust and then change your route concepts. And there's just too much standing around from the receivers on 3rd down too. Like, if they're covered at first, it's like, oh, well, guess I'm covered. Well, that sucks. Live to fight another day. Instead of, hey, I'm covered, start doing something, have a plan, do something.
Right.
And those are just all parts of it where, again, no rhyme or reason, but that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, the play call was bad, but man, you got to work for something, bro. And that's just leads into that urgency thing that we've talked about the receiving core all year. And I mean, that's receiver 101, Ryan. You've told me you were an offensive coordinator at like what, high school, junior high school, right? High school.
Yeah.
You're telling me you guys didn't have your kids at receiver saying, hey, if you're covered, don't just stand there.
Work back.
Like,
find
work, do something. You know what the other
you practice the scramble drill all the time, man. As far as like where your locations are,
right,
and where you're coming back to or going up or whatever. Yeah.
And there are principles you teach. Hey, look, you can't work this way because you can't run into the other guy. You know what
Yes.
what the entire pass concept is. But those are things too. Is like more movement is ideal, and not. And when I mean movement, not just a bunch of mesh stuff. Like teams kind of know that's coming. But here's a thought: how about you do a mesh where you just do a stutter like you're about to block a guy, and then boom, go high. See teams do stuff like that. Run a pivot route, make it look like your mesh, bam, slam it down and get back outside. There's all types of things that are there that I've run, that I know you've seen, that you've run, that everybody runs. That it's like, it's okay using that stuff, guys. Have a plan. But whoever's in charge of third down this season has not done a good job prepping, because that's kind of how it works, right? It's like different coaches have different parts of, hey, you're the one that's putting together the third down plan. That's you're working on a run game. Joe Rudolph and Dylan McCullough doing a lot of stuff with getting the run game going. Somebody is in charge. I don't know whether it's Gino Gaduli or Chancey Stuckey or Jared Parker, but somebody's kind of, you're the primary guy for third down. Well, whoever that is needs to do a better job, because if you just improve that part of your game, your offense is better. Now, is it lighting the world on fire? No, but it's definitely better. And so that's the last part. If Notre Dame comes out early and they're converting third downs early, then this offense will roll against Pitt, and it'll just start building and building and building. Because, I mean, Ryan, we talked about get the ball outside, but it may not be the first play of the game you're throwing posts and goes. It just may be – you're getting some, you're getting some slides outside. You're getting a bubble outside. You're getting some nows outside. You're doing other things like that. And then that sets up those things. Because I've seen Pitt at times will come out early and their field corner will play off, and so maybe you can hit a couple hitches or hit a couple things there. And then they come up and boom, now you go. But the point is the ball's got to go outside. And there's got to be some purpose. And that's where I think having Jaden Thomas back could be good for this team if they're willing to use him in a way. Because you and I thought coming in the year that Jaden Thomas was going to be a third down machine. But that was thinking he would still be playing some inside and some to the field, not just being a permanent boundary. Because who have been the great third down weapons for Notre Dame in recent season? It's Michael Mayer, it's Avery Davis. Well, those are guys, it's easier to have a third down weapon that's more inside as opposed to a one-on-one outside guy. So that's a situation where you say, hey, look, maybe this is one of those times when you mix things up a little bit. I mean, like, say you have Rico Flores or Tobias Merriweather as your Z. You have Jaden Thomas as your X. He's the boundary. And you have Chris Tyree at the F position, which is the slot. Well, I'm going to have this third down concept where I'm going to actually put Tobias or Rico into the boundary. I'm going to put Chris Tyree to the field, get that speed outside, and then I'm going to have Jaden Thomas kind of work in my slot. That's my third down package in this game. With in some weeks, like against Louisville, that doesn't work because Louisville's got really long corners that's going to present problems where they're not going to be as worried about that Chris Tyree matchup on the outside. Louisville's kids were long and they could run. Well, Pitt's kids aren't long and they can't run. So it presents a little bit of a different matchup for you if you're Notre Dame. Now you get Jaden Greathouse kind of matched up against backers. And so there's things like that you can do that may not make sense against Duke, who has Al Blades is their short corner at 6'1".
At 6'1".
I know the Rivers kid rotates in, and but like when they've got Jones and Blades on the field, it's 6'1" and 6'4". You're not going to put Chris Tyree outside. This is one of those games where you could do some things like that. So there's got to be some creativity to get matchups, because I think third down scheme is important, but third down is the best matchup down in football. And that's what I love is offense coaches understand, hey, I like this matchup, whether it's getting a running back in space against a linebacker, whether it's getting a slot receiver or doing something like that. That's where they got to be better and have a better plan, play with some urgency, and then execute that plan. If they can do that this bye week, then they're going to be able to come out and be effective in that situation.
And if they are offensively able to do that, they have a chance to roll Pitt on Saturday. So offensive key to victory, there it is. Yes. Sorry.
I was going to say, a guy that was a very good weapon for them early and at times on third down has been Chris Tyree. They need to be more. I mean, he had the big third down conversion against Central Michigan. He had a big third down conversion against Ohio State. That's another one. And that him and Faison both, because Faison could do some of those things too. They've got to do more to get those guys moving fast on third down. force the other team to be stressed by that, because they could not only get open, but that could open up some other things. So those are all aspects of aspects that I want to see on third down. I just wanted to get that last part in there.
No, you're good. And I think if Notre Dame's offense comes out and has a big day against Pittsburgh, we're going to get into defense in a second, but they have a chance to roll this team and kind of finish this one off early. I really do think they have that potential. Will potential become production? Will it become on field? Will you be able to actualize it? That is the major question. But we're going to get over to defense next here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Brian, you feel pretty good about defense, right, for Notre Dame right now? This is one that we've talked about. I think we said it on Tuesday. This is about just continuing to do what you do, man. Don't mess things up. And I know that for us, like the best defenses for me are ones that the offenses that they go against, they keep them who they are and then take away what they do well, right? So what Pitt is on paper right now is they are a bad running team. They are bad. Sibo Fleminster, I know he's coming off of his best game this year. He ran for over 100 yards last week. I get that. But he's averaging 4.1 yards a carry. Rodney Hammond's averaging 4.1 yards a carry. This team is just not a very good run defense. So first key to victory as we get into this one on the defense side of the football, don't let them run the football this week, man. Dominate the run game. Make them one-dimensional, because we'll get into it, but if Pitt becomes a passing offense this week, I like Notre Dame's chances. I like Notre Dame's chances. I'll leave it at that. But it needs to start with Pitt is going to come out and they're going to try to get the run game going, because that's how they're built. That is like Notre Dame. Similarly, they are built through being good offensive line wise and then be able to get the run game going. Notre Dame needs to come out and dominate the run game to make this team one-dimensional, because they're not a good running team. They're just not.
When you can point to Sibo's 100-yard game last week, and I was happy to see it, because I really like Sibo. I think he's a good kid, and I'm glad things are working out well for him at Pitt. But he averaged 4.6 yards a carry. That's fine. That's nice. Their other running back had 1 yard for 3 carries. So even though he had 100 yards as a running back room, they had 106 yards on 26 carries. That's not that great. And they did it against a Wake Forest defense that no opponent has had. Like every Power 5 opponent they've played this year has gone for more yards per carry than what they had. I mean, Vanderbilt went for 4.5. Georgia Tech went for 4.9. Clemson went for 4.9. Virginia Tech went for 3.9, and Pitt went for 3.5. So as a team, so even that performance wasn't even that good when you look at the overall team rushing performance, because all the yards were by Sibo. And so, to your point, Ryan, they're not a good rushing team. They're just not. Even their quote unquote good performance wasn't that good, because they went for 112 as a team. And you take out the Wofford game, and they're averaging about 88 or so yards per game rushing. That's it. It's not good. Their best yards per attempt game of the season is 4.8 against Wofford. Their next best is 4.0 flat against North Carolina. And every other game that they've had, all 6 other games or 5 other games, are 3.61 yards per rush or lower. So, yeah, there's no excuse not to dominate the run game. It's not about anything in particular. It's just execute, come in and execute. I mean, it really comes down to that. It's be locked in, be focused, and execute. And for Al Golden, don't make this be one of those games where you're trying to show everyone how smart you are, which he has a tendency to do. He did that against Central Michigan, and it cost him. Come out, do what you've been doing, turn the D-line loose, let your linebackers run free, and they're going to rack up a lot of tackles, a lot of negatives, and then you're going to put Pitt into a lot of we have to throw the ball situations, Ryan. And to your point, that matchup is the biggest mismatch that Notre Dame has had all season and will have all season against a Power 5 team. When you look at the numbers of the Notre Dame pass defense against the Pitt pass offense. So, yeah, make it about that, Ryan, to your point, and I feel really good about this game for Notre Dame.
It's crazy what one offseason does, man. I know you lost Izzy Abaconda from last year, who was a really good running back, but it's like, dang, one player has turned you from a pretty dang good rushing offense to a bad rushing offense in one offseason? Because like they didn't lose. I know like they lost Matthew Goncalves at left tackle to injury this year, which was a big loss. But like other than that, they lost like Marcus Minor, like nobody substantial from an offensive line perspective, but they're struggling up front, man. And when a team is struggling, continue to let them struggle, make them struggle more. It's the biggest thing for me, right? So Notre Dame's defensive line, get after it this week, man. That offensive line is you can have your way with that one. You can have your way with that one. Give the linebackers some easy reads, get into the backfield as well, get downhill, post trigger, and it should be a good time, man. It should be a good time. If we come out of this game and it's like Pittsburgh ran the ball a lot better than we anticipated, it's like, oh, that's not good, man. That's not good. I think back a little bit, Brian, because I know that it didn't end up being a great rushing performance by him, but like, you remember last year against Stanford when we came in that game? It's like that team is a terrible rushing performance, but they like outdid as they were as a rushing team on the year in that football game. Where I'm just like, that's not good, man. Like, leave them keep them bad in that area.
Like it was one of those things where Stanford didn't rack up a lot of yards in that game, and it wasn't like they went out and just like, oh my gosh, they ran for 250 yards against Notre Dame. It was a vintage Stanford performance. No, they rushed for 97 yards in the game. But some of that was like, sacks and things like that. And like Casey Filkins rushed for, I'm putting it up, he rushed for 91 yards and it took 32 carries to get there. But it's just like, it just was like 3 and 4 and they just couldn't make stops. And then whenever they needed a play, he would then go rip off a 7-yard run. And it just was like, how are you not stopping? How are you not completely dominating this team? And you look at it and you say the numbers weren't all that impressive. But then when you look at who Stanford was last year running the football, that 97 yards was one of their top 5 performances of the season up to that point in time in the season. And it just was one of those things where, that was a team last year, Ryan, that in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of their 12 games last year rushed for under 100 yards. It can't be like that. I think that's a great analogy because that was another offense a lot like this Pitt one. Offensive line can't really open up the run game. The backs are tough kids, but not real dynamic, and the receivers are okay, but don't scare you. There's just no reason to come out in this game. And that team had an NFL quarterback. This one doesn't. Or at least Christian Veilleux may get there someday, but he's not there right now. Because I think you like his arm a little bit, Ryan. I know I'd like his arm. He's young and raw, and this is his 3rd start, and it shouldn't be now, right? His NFL moment can't be now. But this is one of those games where this has been one of the Achilles heels of the defense in games they've struggled. And Duke was that way. Louisville was that game. Now, what's interesting is in both games, it was the second half where they started having some issues. They actually did a pretty good job shutting Duke's run game down in the first half. I mean, Duke had 0 points in the first half. I thought they did a pretty good job of shutting down the Louisville run game. The only success I remember Louisville having running the football in the first half was when they were running that little option-looking thing, that little speed option look pitch type of play. That's it. And then once they shut that down, it was like, okay, they couldn't do anything until the second half. If you shut Pitt down the way that you did those teams where Duke and Louisville combined for 7 points in the first half, if you do that against Pitt, this game's over at halftime, most likely, and so that's why it's really important that you come out and do that because you've got to get some answers in your run game, and this is a chance for you to do it. And really, none of the next 4 teams are really very good at running the football. I mean, even Clemson, who I really thought they were going to be able to run the football this year. I really did. I thought they're going to be able to run the football this year and at least be good at it. Maybe not great at it, but good at it. And they're not even running the ball that well. They're going for like 165 a game, but part of that's because they went for 274 against Charleston Southern, and they're coming off a game where they ran for 31 yards against Miami, Florida. So you're not playing a lot of great rushing teams down the stretch. You've got to start getting that part of your game right. Because if you do that, Ryan, it sets up we could literally end it right here, shut down the Duke run game, and it just end it and be like, all right, that's the keys to the game. Because if they can't run the ball, they have 0 chance of scoring on Notre Dame, unless Notre Dame is just, which kind of leads us to the next point, Ryan. But unless Notre Dame just plays with no discipline in this game.
Yeah, I mean, point number two, as you alluded to, is be disciplined, Brian. And this is one of those ones where we talked about it again early in the week, where it's just kind of like, just keep doing what you're doing. And part of not keep doing what you're doing is don't shoot yourselves in the foot, man. Don't make stupid mistakes where you're out of position, where you're rotating to the wrong coverage, where you're filling the wrong gap. Those, if Pitt's able to break a nice run, for instance, or they create a big play in the passing game, it's more than likely, this is again not taking anything away from Pitt's players, but it's more than likely because Notre Dame made a mistake, because there was some mistake that you were not able to, like, if they went outside against Benjamin Morrison, could they win a 50-50 ball at some point and maybe make a play that way? Sure. But if a guy is running free down the football field and for a big gain, if a running back is untouched through a hole, it's probably because there was some sort of miscommunication or there was a lapse in technique and discipline. Those things are probably more than likely. So yeah, man, none of those freebies. Those are almost freebies for me. It's like Maris fills the wrong gap, and I'm just using Maris as an example. Maris fills the wrong gap. You got two players in B gap, and then the C gap's wide open, and you break it for a 15, 20-yard run to extend a drive on 3rd and 3. Like, those
Sibo
are the
can do
types of
that,
things
Ryan.
you can't do. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sibo can do that. I mean, Sibo's a good football player. I mean, he's not a great football player. I mean, there's a reason he transferred from Notre Dame, and he was buried on a depth chart of even better players. If he was at Notre Dame right now, he's not playing a whole lot. He's not. But that's because Notre Dame's loaded at running back. It's not because Sibo's not a quality football player. I mean, he's got good vision. He can make those cuts. He's a 6th-year senior. He'll make those cuts.
He's a tough kid
And find
too, man.
those
He runs
holes.
hard.
Yeah, he's a tough runner. He's always been, even when he was undersized at Notre Dame, he was young as a young kid. He was a tough runner. He's a tough kid. So yeah, you have those mistakes, and Sibo hurt you for a 15, 20-yard gain, and all of a sudden you've given them cheap yards and cheap first downs. And we always say it, Ryan, and I'm a big believer in this. If a team beats me because they just outplay me and they're making plays and they're blocking us and they're completing balls, and then I can live with that. I mean, I'm not happy about it, and we'll make it. But what I can't stand is when you give teams yards, when you give them because we didn't do what we're supposed to do as a team.
Freebies.
That's what drove me nuts as a coach, right? It's like if the other team just is covering my receivers and locking us down, and you know what, I got to go recruit better players and I got to do a better job coaching these kids to play to the best of their ability. But when we're not doing it because you ran the wrong route or you dropped the pass, or like, that's us. That's on us. We're taking yards away from ourselves. Those are the things that drive me nuts. Is that self-inflicted stuff. And Pitt's just not good enough to hurt you unless you do things that are outside of your character, outside of the system. And then that leads to the third play, Ryan, which is no big plays. Because that's really all Pitt has is big plays. I mean,
very interrelated here. Very interrelated. The be disciplined and no big plays. Because again, is there a play where Gavin Bartholomew maybe boxes out a safety and just makes a great play on the football down the field? Sure, it's possible. Can Nante Mumfield make a play down the field at some point in this football game? Sure, it could happen. Could Bub Means make a play? Yes, they're all capable of it. But more often than not, if there are big plays in this football game, it's going to come back to Notre Dame not doing what they need to do, being outfought for a 50-50, being in the wrong position, being in the wrong coverage, those types of situations. And Pitt, while they are a bad passing team, one, because quarterbacks are just not there right now functionally, offensive line wise, not very good pass protectors either. They limit the things. But there are some decent pass game weapons. I like Kanante Mumfield. I think Bub Means is a pretty solid football player. I like Gavin Bartholomew a lot at tight ends. If Notre Dame is able, if Pitt is able to get time to pass the football and the quarterback is playing good ball, then they have some guys that can make some plays down the field. But that's the game, like, Brian, like if you shut down this run game and they become a passing offense, you need to follow that up and not letting them get a lot of big plays, man. Make them work for it, right? Make Kanante Mumfield have to try to win after the catch. Make Gavin Bartholomew have to catch short of the sticks and try to make a guy miss in space. Those are the plays that you need them to make. And hey, if Kanante Mumfield makes a guy miss in space and gets a first down, great for him, man. Good job. You were a player that made a play. But don't just give up easy explosives in this football game. That would be a backbreaker to this defense.
Like, what was the ball that I think was it NC State that Cam Hart? It was the longest catch he's given up all year. It was a 38-yard gain. It was like Cam's in great position, and it was the best ball Brendan Armstrong threw all day. And it's just like, dude, there's not a lot you can do about that. Make them do that. I can live with that. I truly can live with that. But you're not going to do that very often, because how many times did
Yeah.
Brennan Armstrong do that against Notre Dame? Once.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen. But when you look at this Pitt team and the upset over Louisville, they had pass plays of 46 yards, 34 yards, 31 yards, and 24 yards. They used big plays. They only caught 12 passes in that game, right? But they went for 16.7 per play. And that played a big role in that win. You look at the Virginia Tech game. They had a 75-yard touchdown pass from Bub Means. This was on a post route from Dracovic to Bub Means. Tebow Flemister went for 61-yard, had a 61-yard touchdown reception in that game. So you only scored 21 points, but 2 of your touchdowns went for 136 yards on 2 plays. Those are things that you look at and say you can't allow that to happen. Same thing in the North Carolina game. They scored 24 points that game. Why? They had some big plays. They had a 23-yard run by Rodney Hammond. Phil Dracovic took off for a 20-yard run before he got hurt, knocked out of the game. Kanata Mumfield had a 40-yard gain. Gavin Bartholomew had a 30-yard gain. He had 2 catches, actually, for 59 yards. He had a 30 and a 29-yard gain, to your point earlier. You look at the Cincinnati game, Bartholomew had a 60-yard catch. Mumfield had a 30-yard catch. He had a 38-yard run from Sebo. That was a big part of their ability to make a comeback late in the fourth quarter. They ripped off a couple big plays. So, again, when Pitt has been successful, it's come from big plays. Even the Wake Forest game, their first touchdown of the game, Ryan, got set up by a 31-yard gain on a pass play on 3rd and 11 or 3rd and 12, something like that early in that first drive, if you remember. And so if you eliminate the big plays, Pitt has zero chance of beating you in this game unless your offense just gifts them 3 touchdowns. I mean, I hate to say that, but Ryan, that's just how bad they've been. Because if you look at a lot of these games, they haven't been all that competitive. I mean, Cincinnati was a 27-21 game, but Pitt scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. It wasn't even that close, and Cincinnati's not good. The Virginia Tech game wasn't close. It just the North Carolina game wasn't really close. The West Virginia game was close score-wise, but Ryan, you watched that game. At any point in time, did you ever feel like Pitt was going to score in the second half and make that a game again? I didn't. I mean, when West Virginia went up 10-7, I was like, Pitt's done. They got no chance. They're not going to go down and put any drives together, and that's exactly what happened. And you look at Pitt after Virginia took a 17-6 lead. Pitt went 6 plays for 5 yards punt, 7 plays 21 yards, turned it over on downs, 5 plays 8 yards, turned it over on downs, and then threw a pick. I mean, they had no chance, and that's just who they are. And you play your game, you play discipline, you give up the big plays, you'll be fine. And here's the thing, Ryan, if you dominate the trenches, this young quarterback will make mistakes. And when he makes mistakes, last key, you got to get the ball.
Yep. Well, and because I think if all the keys happen, Brian, where you're not giving up easy explosives, when they're not able to run the football well, if those things happen, quarterback position is going to get forced into some tough situations. Like we spent a lot of time talking about Notre Dame offense as far as on 3rd down, you need to be really good, right? And the problem with Notre Dame not performing well on 3rd down is, I think a big reason is there's been a lot of 3rd and longs. Like there's been a lot of long situations to try to convert. If you get this Pitt offense in the 3rd and longs, you are going to have opportunities because I think this quarterback is a pretty good athlete. I think he'll try to extend the pocket a little bit and hold on to the football at times. I think he will try to do that, and that gives your pass rush more time to get to him. And then after that, he's a young kid who has only started a couple football games. You have a chance to force him into some bad situations. There's no doubt. Those 3rd and longs, I think, could be the money time for the Notre Dame defense to go hunting.
Ryan, when you look at this Pitt offense and we talk about how their pass game is not good, here's some context that just kind of shows you just how not good it actually has been this year. So let's look at Pitt so far this season. Obviously, Wofford's an FCS team. We won't look at Wofford, but here's the rest of their opponents and where they rank in passing defense. Cincinnati ranks 95th in pass defense. North Carolina ranks 70. Let's go find North Carolina. 90th in pass defense. West Virginia ranks 66th in pass defense. Virginia Tech ranks 8th. It's pretty good. They threw a 75-yard touchdown pass against them. Louisville ranks 62nd, and then Wake Forest ranks 86th. So it's not like they're doing this against really good pass defenses either, and here's a cool stat for you, Ryan. So I did some data on this last night because a statement that I made in my article about the defense today is that Notre Dame has arguably the best pass defense in college football. I mean, I think it's at least arguable. Ohio State's got a very good one. Michigan's got a good one, at least on paper. Penn State's got a good one, at least on paper. But when you look at it in context of who they've played, here's an interesting stat for you. I thought you'd appreciate this. So in order for me to evaluate, I like to look at who have you played. And Notre Dame has played 3 top 30 passing offenses, including 2 in the top 15. With USC, Louisville, and then Ohio State. They're all top 30 teams. And the Penn State's played 1 top 60 defense. So Penn State has played 1 offense that ranked higher than 70th in passing offense. That was Ohio State. And the rest of their opponents ranked 82nd, 102nd, this is Michigan. So Penn State's only played 1 team ranked higher than 70th. Notre Dame has played 3. Michigan's highest ranked pass offense they faced is UMass at 82nd.
Oh, UMass.
The rest of their pass offenses rank 85th, 102nd, 120th, 123rd, 125th, 128th, and 129th. So Notre Dame, as I said, has Notre Dame held USC. So the 3 really good pass offenses they faced, they held Notre Dame held Ohio State 60 yards below their season average, held USC 123 yards below their season average, and held Louisville 140 yards below their season average. Notre Dame this season, despite playing a significantly tougher passing offensive schedule, has held opponents 61.4 yards below their season average. Penn State's at 52.1, and Michigan is only 28.3. This is why I say let's pump the brakes on how good Michigan is until they actually play someone with a pulse, especially offensively. Maybe they will be great. We'll see, but you have no idea right now. But I think that speaks volumes of how good this Notre Dame pass defense has been this season. Is that they don't rank in the top 5 in passer rating, yards allowed per attempt, total passing defense, fewest touchdowns, and all that kind of stuff because they're not playing anybody. They're doing it because they're just that good, and they don't have the pass rush that Michigan and Penn State have. Could you imagine if Notre Dame had the pass rush that those teams had? So I just have a hard time seeing this defense allowing Pitt to throw the ball on them if they're locked in. That's why we circle back to the beginning as we wrap this up, Ryan. That's where this comes down to. This matchup is so one-sided that the only way Pitt has a chance is if Notre Dame just is not mentally in this football game. If it's like it was, and that's why I love the example you brought up to Stanford, because I don't know what it was. Stanford was way worse than Pitt. Yeah. And it still beat you because you just could see the energy level in the city. Just like they don't want to be here right now. Like they're just not ready to be here. As long as we don't see that, this really should not be a competitive football game. It really shouldn't. And I mean, it could be 21-0. I mean, like where the offense doesn't play great because Pitt's defense is actually decent, but this offense should not at all be able to move the ball with any kind of consistency. Maybe get a big play or 2 here and there, but it should be a dominant performance. It really should.
It should. I think this one's going to come down to preparation and mindset coming into this football game. I mean, we could talk about all the keys to victory, and they all matter, obviously, as far as offensive line playing well, stopping the run game defensively, forcing a young quarterback into some bad mistakes. Obviously, those matter. But I think the biggest key, and coming off of that, Brian, is that this one's on the coaching staff and this team to get yourself mentally prepared to play this football game. If you're locked in, you had a good week, 2 weeks of preparation, and you feel and you're feeling positively about the progress, then you should roll this one. You absolutely should. But there's always that little but what if in the back
because you always
mind.
think, well, they should have done that in 2018. They should have done that in 2012. They should have done that in 2013 against Pitt. Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
I think that Notre Dame could be their worst enemy. I think that is the only way that Pitt could even compete or win this football game is that if Notre Dame is their worst enemy. If Notre Dame comes out low energy, give up a couple big plays, maybe turn the football over a couple of times offensively. Like that's how Pitt shocks you in this football game. I don't see it happening, but I'd be lying if I didn't say it hasn't crossed my mind at least once over the last week and a half.
Well, especially since we saw it a couple weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now against Louisville. And if you want, and somebody just pointed out in the chat, but like that's a perfect example. I mean, I'm not doing the transitive property thing, but what I am saying is we know that Louisville's a good football team. We saw them in person, Ryan. You and I have broken down their film. We know there's some NFL players on that team on both sides of the ball, and even guys that maybe aren't NFL players. Like, I don't know if Jawar Jordan's big enough to be an NFL guy. I have no idea. You're an NFL guy. But here's what I know. That's a good college football player.
Very good.
That's an athletic kid. And Pitt beat them by 17. Why? Because they turned the ball over 3 times. Why did Louisville almost lose to an NC State team that's not very good that Notre Dame blew out? This is an example. Louisville smacked Notre Dame. Notre Dame smacked NC State. Louisville was lucky to beat NC State. Why? 3 turnovers. That's it. So a superior football team can get beat or have an ugly win over a not very good team if they're not locked in, not sharp, making mistakes, giving up big. Because what did Louisville do? They gave up big plays on defense. They turned the ball over on offense. Ball game. Yep. That's it. That was the game, Ryan. That was the game. And Notre Dame can't allow that to happen. And it comes down to what you've said, just be locked in. If they're locked in, this is going to be a W. May not be pretty, but it'll be a W. And we'll see how that goes.
No doubt about it. So that is the Notre Dame keys to victory. We're going to get into predictions next. It's going to be very interesting because I have not seen Brian's predictions. I know he has seen mine, but we'll get into how we see it going. So maybe throw some game balls out there. But that's going to do it for this portion of the podcast dedicated to the defensive side on the Notre Dame game against Pitt this weekend. All right, are we ready for predictions, Brian? Are we ready?
I'm ready, man.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Right.
This was an interesting one, Ryan. I've been kind of back and forth on this one all week. I've had some lower scoring outcomes. I've had some higher, and I finally settled it on my score because at the end of the day, it's kind of like what we talked about. I don't know that Pitt is able to play a certain way, and I have a feeling this Notre Dame team is going to be locked in and ready to go this week. So when I was kind of going back and forth on my predictions, Ryan, it was never, I think Notre Dame might lose. I mean, that's just, you're going to have to give Pitt the game for that. I mean, I know you say, anything can happen on any given Saturday. I get all that, but usually when those upsets happen, it's because you shoot yourself in the foot. It's not because that team wanted to look like Alabama for a day. That's not how it works. You know what I mean? And you look at North Carolina this past weekend against Virginia and you could just tell North Carolina wasn't locked in. They just thought they were going to come out there and just roll over Virginia, and it didn't happen, right? And you had some big mistakes and things like that, and you let Virginia win the game. Notre Dame's not North Carolina, with all due respect. And so, but to what degree does this happen, Ryan? I think that's the bigger question, and that's what we're going to find out. So we're going to start off giving our predictions, and as always, Mr. Roberts, we're going to let you kick things off. So what I want to know, Ryan, is I want to know what your score is. Obviously, you'll say who's winning when you do that, and I want you to tell me how you see this game playing out for your score to get to where it got to. Because when I saw your score, I was honest with you, I was pleased, but a little surprised. So I'll let you talk it through, and then I'll ask you some questions if you don't answer the questions that I have for you.
Sure. Well, I had Notre Dame winning this football game, 37-13 over Pitt. That was my score prediction. For me, I look at this game and I say, offensively for Pitt, just don't see it being sustainable. I don't, right? 13 was, because this is actually a little bit pessimistic on the defensive side of the football. I wanted to go even lower for this from the Pitt total. I was going to go 7, maybe 10. I gave him 13 because I think that coming off a bye, there's always some weird things that can happen. Maybe you give up a big play. Maybe there's a late score. You never really can know what happens after buys at times if the team isn't fully locked in. But I ended up with 13 for Pitt because I just don't think that they're going to be able to sustain much throughout this football game. I think that the 13 is going to be they score one late, or there's a busted play and early in the second half, something of that
That was
regard.
going to be my question, Ryan. That was my question was there. So you answered it. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that the defense for Notre Dame, I think, is going to play a really good football game. I think Pitt is going to make a couple plays, but I don't think it being overly sustainable. I went with 37 for Notre Dame because, to be very honest, like, I wanted to go higher, guys. I really did. I think that there is a reality where Notre Dame drops 40 plus on this Pitt team, and it looks a little bit similar-ish to like the Boston College game from last year, where you're like, that game wasn't even close from start to finish. I think that reality does exist, but I still have my hesitation with the Notre Dame offense. I do. So I end up going 37. I'm going to say it's 37-13, maybe midway through the fourth. Notre Dame gets another touchdown to just kind of stamp, seal, and deliver the guy, makes it look, nice and pretty in the end. I think Notre Dame's offense has some life. It's getting better. It's improving, but I still think that we're going to see a little bit of, there's still progress that needs to be made, right? Like, this offense is not perfect, and I don't think it's going to be perfect because Pitt is a good defense, and it's going to force you to be uncomfortable in some situations. But I think the offense shows growth this week. I think that they put out a good overall performance, not a great performance, but a good performance. They wear down on this Pitt team, and the defense ultimately just stifles Pitt when it matters most.
I have to say, Ryan, I've been a little surprised. We got a super chat from Raymond Harton who says he has it 42-6, finish off 4-0 and win in New Year's Six Bowl. Go Irish. Yeah, I'm with you on that, buddy. I am definitely with you on that. Ryan, I got to admit, I'm surprised at how many Notre Dame fans are picking this to be a close game. It's certainly possible, but I wonder if that's about a lack of faith in this team, or if it's just about years worth of Pitt giving Notre Dame a battle. But I kind of thought, because 2 of the last 3 games have been Notre Dame blowouts, that I thought kind of we as fans were a little bit past that. Pitt always gives Notre Dame a tough game, because even the 42-30 game from 2015, it was like 42-14, and Notre Dame started pulling their starters, and Pitt got like that. Remember that fumble recovery by that shorter DN that transferred in? I'm trying to remember his name. He was a real quick kid, but short. He picks up a fumble, a Brandon Wimbush fumble, by the way, meaning the backup quarterback. Yes, Elijah Price. Yes. Was it Elijah? Now I'm going to look it up.
I think it was Ewan Price or something.
Yes, like Ewan Price. Yes. Yep, had 19.5 tackles for loss that year. Really good player.
Good player. Yeah.
But yeah, it was not a close game, like, at all. And Pitt put a couple on them late to make it that close. Like 2 of the last 3 games have been blowouts. And so I just kind of thought we were past that. But I was curious to see how many people have picked it to be a lower game. Maybe they're trying to do a bit of a, like, here's another one. We have 19-7, 31-6. I'm like, I know the offense has struggled, but I keep trying to tell people, and Jared Parker made this point, and when I first read it, I didn't like what he said, but then when I watched what he was saying, and I was like, okay, I get what he's saying. Like, but he's talking about, like, you played 3 really good defenses that kept you in check, right? And with all due respect, Pitt's not as good as those defenses. And Notre Dame still scored over 20 points in 2 of those 3 games, and Pitt's not even in the same universe right now as what Ohio State is defensively. And I just wonder if I'm just curious. I wonder if it has more to do with just the history of this rivalry or not. But I like that you have it as a convincing win in this game. If it does turn out the way that you have it, let me ask you this, Ryan. Who is getting your game balls for the Notre Dame offense and Notre Dame defense if Notre Dame does win it like you have it?
Offensively, finally, Brian, Sam Hartman game ball. It's been a rough couple, but I'm going to give Sam the ball. I'm going to say that they get the passing offense going a little bit. They finally make some plays. Sam goes over 300 passing yards in this football game for the victory. So I'm going to say Sam Hartman offensively. Defensively, I think the defensive line has a chance to just swarm to this game, man. I honestly wanted to give it to both the interior defensive linemen because they've been the most consistent for me all year. I'm going to go with Howard Cross again because I think the interior defensive line is pretty poor. I think Howard Cross could have another game. Not going to be like the Duke game he had, right? Like, I'm not going to predict 13 tackles and 3.5 tackles for loss, but I'm going to say Howard Cross has a big game. So Howard Cross defensively, Sam Hartman for the offense.
I'm going to wait to respond to that one because I have
Okay.
some thoughts. I think I'm with you on that, but when it comes to okay, if that happens, who gets player of the game? I have an interesting take on
Yep.
that, and I want to get your response
Okay.
to it. So we do storylines too, Ryan. We predict like what the big storylines are. I'm gonna ask it a little bit this way: if Sam Hartman does what you say, has
Yep.
300-yard game, which I think is certainly possible, has a 300-yard game, close to it, plays really well, and Notre Dame offense rolls. What are we talking about at receiver if that happens? What's the
I think we're
conversation that we're having
right.
about the receiving core if that happens?
I mean, it would have to be that some explosive plays were created, right? Like you're not going to get the 300 yards just throwing 10 and under all day, like because I don't see Sam Hartman throwing the ball quite that much. I think there's going to be some explosive plays created. So I think that we're going to talk about Notre Dame wide receivers getting healthy this week and starting to make some plays down the field. I think that's my main takeaway. It might be hopeful for me as far as my take, but I'm really hopeful that Jaden Thomas now back healthier. Jaden Greathouse now back healthier. This wide receiver room is going to be the healthiest it has been in several weeks. I hope that they're able to make some explosive plays. That's my prediction.
Here's an interesting one from Patrick Duffy with a super chat. Thank you, Patrick, very, very much. He says Notre Dame 42-0 over Pitt. He says, I think Tobias Merriweather has a 2-touchdown game. I don't, at this point in time, I'm in show me mode with Tobias Merriweather, and everybody knows how high I
Yeah.
am on Tobias, but I just have to see it. But I will say this, if that happens, this offense is going to be really hard to stop down the stretch because that'll be the
Yes.
kind of breakout game that he needs mentally to be
Yeah.
like, okay, I got this. And for Sam Hartman to mentally say, yeah, this kid's pretty good. So if that happens, Ryan, then then we're gonna have a lot to it's gonna make this team very interesting down the stretch. Very interesting down the stretch
Very,
when it
very.
comes to who they are. You ready? You ready for mine, Ryan? Is it cool
Let's
that I
do it.
give mine? All right.
Absolutely.
I saw it similarly to you, except I just don't see Pitt getting that late score. My prediction is Notre Dame 34-6. That's my prediction in this game. So I have Notre Dame winning 34-6. I think I don't have the offense playing that as well as you do. I hope you're right. What I think where my 34-6 comes from is more the offense plays well, solid football. They run okay. They hit a couple big plays. The pass game is good. Sam throws for 250, and run game goes for like a buck 50. Which is a good day, but not a great day. But I think part of that's because they're going to have a lot of short fields. I just think Notre Dame is going to absolutely, completely overwhelm this Pitt offense. And you're going to see short punts, and you're going to see, special teams being aggressive, because this is one of those games, and we didn't talk a lot about special teams, but this is one of those games. If I'm Marcus Freeman, I'm telling Marty Biaggi, let's go get one. Let's be aggressive, because we have a defense that can, if something happens, we have a defense that can bail us out, and our offense will be able to go out and make some plays. So I'd like to see Notre Dame be a little bit more aggressive in this game too. And this is a Pitt team that has allowed 2 kicks to get blocked already this year, and has North Carolina returned a punt. I think it was like 50, 60 yards for a touchdown, 40, 50 yards for a touchdown in this game as well. So this is a game, Ryan, where I just see Notre Dame working with a lot of short fields, and it just making it easier to score. So I see the offense playing good football, not great football, but I think this is just going to be a game that's completely dominated by the defense. And I could be completely wrong here. When I watch the film, Ryan, I see a team. Here's what I see about Pitt. I see a team that has no chance offensively to play a straight up game against Notre Dame and have success. I mean, straight up game meaning no big mistakes. It's just our guys versus your guys. Who's got the better players? Yeah, when you look at the receivers Notre Dame has faced this year, with all due respect to Mumphrey and Bub and their tight end, they just don't stack up to the athletes that Notre Dame has played. I mean, they're going to be used to these kind of kids, right? I mean, that's my big point. And so I think that it just comes down from sheer dominance defensively. And that's where my confidence comes from. It kind of reminds me a little bit, kind of how I see the game playing out, a little bit to like the 2021 game against Navy. If you remember, where Notre Dame's offense was okay but not great, but they just completely dominated the Navy offense. I mean, Navy that day had 184 yards of offense. That's it. and Notre Dame just shut them out. Notre Dame's offense was good. They hit a big play to Kevin Austin, if you remember that deep ball they hit to Kevin Austin. He had 430 yards, and it was a very similar score to 34-6. And so that's kind of where I see it playing out. If the Notre Dame offense does what you think it's going to do, and the Notre Dame defense does what I think it's going to do, I could see this being an even more convincing game.
Yeah.
But that I just need to see it with the offense. That's where I'm at. I just need to see it with the offense. And I know you do too. Yeah.
I think this game could be a Boston College game last year, like where you're just like from start to
Georgia
finish. You're
Tech
just
2
like,
years ago as well.
Like,
Yeah.
from start to finish, you're just like, yeah, that wasn't going to ever end well for the opposition. Like Notre Dame could have that type of game, but yeah, I just need to see a little bit. Hopefully.
Well, you know why I think you could be right, Ryan? Because you know why I think that the Notre Dame Boston College game went like it did last year? It's because of what Boston College did the week before. Yeah. It's like they were terrible. When they went on the road and beat a ranked NC State team the week before coming to Notre Dame was like, okay, guys, we can't take this team lightly. I think the players say, hey, look what they just went on the road. They got a new quarterback. It's a different team. They got Zay Flowers, right? Like, guys, this team can hurt you if you don't come locked in. NC State wasn't locked in, and they hurt NC State. I think that is why Notre Dame was so locked in that game. And just from jump, I mean, Morrison jumps that hitch route. Emmett Morehead was just overwhelmed by the defensive front, much like you're predicting that this Pitt defense or Pitt offense will have happen to them by this Notre Dame front. And they just jumped on them quick. And I think Pitt beating Louisville 2 weeks ago, Notre Dame players are going to be watching that film saying, I know how good that team is. And I just watched Pitt beat them by 17. We're not sleeping on these guys. That's honestly why. If Louisville would have smacked Pitt and beat them by the same score that Pitt beat Louisville, I think I'd be much more concerned about Notre Dame not being locked into this game. I do. But with that game happening, I just kind of feel like that could be the thing that makes this team say, hey, we're going to come out locked in and ready to go. So that's why I predicted that the way that I did. My game balls, I hope so too. And I think you think that too. That's why you have the score that you have as well. I think we're on the same page there. My game balls offensively, same as yours. And it's Sam Hartman. 250 yards, manages the game, gets a couple shots down the field that loosens Pitt up. I see Kenny Minchie and Steve Angeli playing in the fourth quarter of this game. That's kind of how I see it going. And then defensively, I'm actually going with Cam Hart in this game, Ryan, for the same exact reason that you went with the D-line, because I do think the D-line is going to overwhelm Pitt. And I think that's going to force the quarterback to make a couple big mistakes to the field that are going to result in big plays for Notre Dame. That's kind of how I see it. And I think he's going to have another big turnover on the perimeter. I think Cam Hart is just the guy that I picked. I see it being a secondary guy because the pressure is going to force this kid at quarterback, Christian Veillere, to make some hurried mistakes that either Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison, DJ Brown, Thomas Harper, or Cam Hart is going to make him pay for in a big, big way. And that's why I'm going with the DB, and the one that I just picked is Cam Hart for the player of the game. I could just see him stepping in front of a couple, because like somebody's asked, like, when was the last time Cam Hart's been had an interception? And I'm like, when it happens, it's going to come in droves. It's kind of like Benjamin Morrison, 0 interceptions for like the first 6-7 games, and he has like 5 over the next 2 games, right? So I could see something like that. So that's kind of where I have it. Storyline for me, Ryan.
Yep.
I think it's just, okay, this Notre Dame offense is slowly but surely finding its way. If it goes how I have it, slowly but surely finding its way. But this defense has turned on another gear. The USC game did not cause them to get complacent or feel good about themselves. It inspired them to say, hey, we can be elite. And I think there's a lot of kids that know that they're playing in their final games at Notre Dame, and they want to leave a big-time impression on Notre Dame, on fans, but also on the people that may be employing them in the future. And so I think there's this defense is going to come out and just really say, hey, we are the best defense of college football, and we want to show you that. I'm not saying that they are, but I'm saying that's the mentality that they have. That look what we just did to the best quarterback in the country and one of the best offenses in the country. We're going to show you that wasn't a fluke. Because I really do. If I was J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau and Cam Hart, Benjamin Morrison, I'd be listening and reading the stuff people are saying about that USC game and be like, y'all act like we didn't even do anything. Y'all act like USC just came out here and just shot themselves in the foot, and we didn't do anything. It wasn't had anything to do with us. It was all USC just shooting themselves in the foot. I'd be a little ticked off. Okay, you guys don't want to respect us? Boom. Here we go. We're gonna go do this and show you that we are that good. And at least that might be wishful thinking more than anything, Ryan. But I could really see that because it's such a veteran group. Like I get more concerned about the young kids feeling good about themselves after a big win. With veterans, I think that they have a greater understanding of, hey guys, that's just one game. We got to keep this thing going. So that's where I'm at, Ryan, with that. That's going to be my storyline is we're going to be talking more and more and more about, wow, this defense is special because yes, Pitt's not good on offense, but dude, look what they did. And so my 6 is actually coming from couple field goal drives where, they hit a big play and it gets them into field goal range. That's basically where it comes from. Nice. I think they'll hit a couple big plays in the pass game, and that's what gets them field goals. Once against the starting defense and then once against the backup defense. That's where my 6 comes from. I don't think this game is ever competitive, in my opinion.
I hope you're right about Cam Hart, especially because I know that he's had a great season, but I'm thinking towards now the NFL draft evaluation, and we know that there's going to be some question marks as far as the medicals and the shoulders and everything like that. But the other big thing that people are going to want to see is just a little bit more ball production. I know that people aren't throwing at him much, but it would be great to see him get a couple turnovers and really kind of quiet that concern. I would love that.
Yeah, agree. So those are our predictions for the game, Ryan. We had a lot of a very wide variety of picks in our chat. A lot of people predicting competitive games. I get where D-Rock has come. D-Rock Irish talked about, and he thinks if everything we say is true, they could blow him out, but he's got 24-20 just because I think he's been around the block like us several times. He remembers those games where Notre Dame should have blown Pitt out in the past. I just think this is a different Notre Dame team and a different Pitt team. So I do expect Notre Dame to control this game. So that's our game predictions, Ryan. Did you feel good? I mean, does that one? I mean, I know you sent me this pick in like the day that I sent you the request for scores. So you felt pretty confident in that. Have you kind of like wavered at all during the week?
I mean, I've been thinking about it over the last like week and a half because I knew it was coming. But with the bye week, I was just kind of like going through. I actually was not settled on it. I actually wanted to predict a little bit higher, and then I got super pessimistic at one point, and then eventually I landed somewhere in the middle. So that's how we got there.
It would be nice to see it be similar in score to the 2020 game. I think that's the kind of statement game that Notre Dame needs to make to really because Pitt's not good, but it's still a program that people have respect for. It's still a program that people believe has a pretty good defense. And if you come out and have a 35, 40 plus point win, that's one of those ones like, when Notre Dame is rolling, they just blew out USC. Now they just blew out Pitt. What are they going to do to Clemson next week? I mean, that's where you can kind of start making people pay attention a little bit more to you than maybe they are right now when it comes to the rankings and the pollsters and recruits as well. Because there's going to be some players on campus this weekend that that Ryan's going to talk about. Yeah, some very important ones. So it'll be nice to see them see a strong performance. And I want to see the crowd. I mean, if you're going to beat the game on there, be loud, right? Don't just because Pitt sucks. Don't just kind of go through the motions as fans either, right? Be loud, be exciting, and I'd love to see the team give them something to be excited about. So I'm looking forward to it, Ryan. Very much looking forward to it. And before we go to the mailbag, don't forget, if you are going to be at the game this weekend, we are tailgating. Our goal is to get there by 11. We'll definitely get there and set up sometime between 11 and 12. So definitely check us out. We'll be in the stadium lot. I just had someone text me during the show, so I'm going to get the second parking pass. So we'll have an IB or a Notre Dame tent set up with an IB flag hanging down from the tent, most likely. So you'll be able to check us out. We'll be in the stadium lot, which is literally directly across from the stadium. It's beside the Joyce lot, closer to the stadium, obviously. So definitely be ready to check them out. So I hope to be able to meet all of you guys at the tailgate tomorrow. So we'll get started between 11 and 12, and then I'll probably be there till about 2:30 before I head in for the game. But, my parents will be there, and they're actually going to go to the game, so they'll just kind of break down right before they go in and get all set up. So people ask, what can we bring? Your appetites. Also, if you have friends and family, this isn't like an IB members only thing, and you'll leave your wife over at the other tailgate. No, bring family, bring friends, bring kids, bring all that kind of stuff. So everybody's welcome. Just bring your appetites. That's going to be the big thing. So, yeah, that's it.
Love it. And that's the keys to victory for Notre Dame. A little bit of game predictions. We are going to go to the mailbag next. Before we do, if you could just hit that like button for us, make sure you subscribe to the podcast notification bell. If you are listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, and 5-star reviews are always very much appreciated. Please go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian had a nice little intel piece on Kenny Minchie very recently on the board. We're going to have some recruiting intel as well coming out there. So make sure you go to boards.irishbreakdown.com for that. Let's get on to the mailbag. Mailbag time. Yes, sir.
So, Ryan, I'm going to bring up that one you wanted to talk about at the end.
Okay.
So now that way we can spend some time on it. You know, I mean, it's a fair question, and I know you
Sure.
want to address it. So we'll bring that one up, even though it is the first question. I'm actually going to bring that up at the end. So we got a couple super chats to get to first.
Awesome. We got a super chat from Raymond Harton. Raymond, thank you so much. Are they asking our offensive line to do too many things that don't suit their strengths, pulling, etc.? Seems like they are going against strengths, slow feet.
I will say this, Ryan. I believe that these guards are good enough to pull occasionally, especially the quick pulls like on power and counter. But I do think they're going to that well too many times, right? I mean, you can't not pull them ever because now you're limiting your run game. You can't just be inside zone duo all day, right? You've got to be able to run some pin and pull. But I do think in the last, really starting with the Duke game, they've gone to that well way too often. And now they're becoming too pull heavy, too trap heavy, too you get outside heavy. And I just don't think that's helped. That's to me, like that's what RPOs are for, right? I mean, run your inside zone and duos and then mix in those pin and pull things because you do have slow-footed guards. You do. And if you want to get outside and you want to attack teams that are loading the box, that's what the RPO game is for. That's what your screen game is for. I mean, that it's been a little frustrating to see that because I understand why they're doing it. They're just trying to kind of gap down and just take guys out and hope that they can open up a crease. I get all that. But you don't really have the athleticism at guard, in my opinion, to do that as often as they're doing it. Like you do it, but like early in the season, like the counter power stuff was like a complement to the inside zone. Now it's become the dominant run, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the run game started to struggle as the counter, the powers and the counters and the buck sweeps and stuff started to become the dominant runs. I don't think it's a coincidence that ties into when the run game started struggling.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that for me, you have to understand what you're good at and what you struggle with because you can't completely just say no, we can't do that, right? Like to even for an occasional buck sweep, getting guys out to the perimeter a little bit. Like you have to be able to stress a defense everywhere. That's the only way that you are not predictable in that nature. And then you also even if you say slow-footed guards, but you'll still pop one occasionally in that situation because it's not predictable. You're like, oh, dang, it wasn't prepared well for that. So I think that the diversity is something that we always pull for on this podcast, being able to show multiple looks and being able to really keep a defense off of their center and their comfort level. You have to be able to do those types of things. So I don't think that you should completely take it out, but I would agree that you need to be a little bit more selective with when you use it and when you want to use it. I mean, and that even goes to like we don't see much screen game in Notre Dame's offense. I think you should be running screen game, but like it might be unique with how you use a screen game, maybe more like middle screen type of situations than guys, pulling completely to the perimeter type of thing. So I think you just need to be selective with how you call offense, but I think that you should be able to show different looks. There's no doubt.
And I just want to thank Patrick Duffy again for that big super chat that he gave with his prediction earlier about the score and Tobias Merriweather, Patrick. So I definitely appreciate that.
We had another question from Keith Wiegand who said, would you guys like to see the offensive run tempo this game? To a degree, Keith, I mean, I've talked about that a ton. I don't think there's any energy in the offense right now. So if Notre Dame's able to create a big play and like early on in like, let's say the first drive, maybe they pop a 20-yard run or they get a nice catch and run for like 15, 20 yards. I would love to see Notre Dame work with a little bit of tempo. I'm a big fan of when you have momentum, hold on to that thing as long as you possibly can and to keep a defense off their comfort zone. I think that you can really take advantage of those in those types of situations. So I'm not asking this team to be an up-tempo offense all the time, but what I'm asking is let's breed a little bit of life in here. Let's make these guys excited to play ball. When things are going well, make sure you hold on to that momentum as long as you can.
Agree with everything you said. I want to add a little bit more to it. I kind of understand why they didn't want to go tempo against USC, especially when they were able to jump out early to a lead because of the turnovers. You're playing a team this weekend, however, who, number one, your defense has a phenomenal matchup against. Like, phenomenal matchup against. You should dominate that matchup. So you should not, and you're also playing a team this weekend, Ryan, that is going to want to shorten the game. And you need to find ways to extend the game, in my opinion. They're going to want to try to limit possessions and keep it close. So not only is it about everything you said is correct about getting some rhythm, getting some momentum, building some confidence. I think there are practical reasons. Pitt likes to do a lot of different calls. So you speed up their play calling process. You get them a little bit more set with some tempo. But I also think it's a perfect time to do it because you are playing an offense that if for some reason that leads to a turnover, a couple quick, if you go tempo and don't get a first down, the other teams get on the field pretty quick. You're coming off a bye, should be rested. You have a lot of depth on defense, and you're playing an offense that's just not good. This is the game to get that going, in my opinion, on top of the reasons of how it can help the offense. So I think it works out and complements the defense as well because, again, I'm just going to show these numbers, Ryan, and I did it in yesterday's show. I know you've seen these. But, this dominance right here, this is insane, this matchup right here. Just nuts. And when you consider that Notre Dame ranks that way, and they've played Caleb Williams in USC and Ohio State and Jeff Brom's offense at Louisville and Riley Leonard at Duke. It puts some context into this, man. And you just realize this is an absolute, utter mismatch between the Notre Dame offense and the Pitt defense. The Notre Dame defense and the Pitt offense. So take advantage. And how you can take advantage is by allowing your offense to maybe take some chances that it normally doesn't. Because we can't just keep being the team we've been. We've got to be able to do things a little bit differently. So, yes, I agree with you on that. Good notes, good thoughts on that one.
Yep. Nathan Milton, what's up, Nathan? Question for the chat. Should Michigan be banned from the playoffs this year?
Well, only if they're found guilty. Yep. Now, here's an interesting thing that I read last night. So, from apparently – this whole thing started, Ryan, I don't know if you read this. This whole thing started because an outside investigative firm gave this stuff, and it was on computers of Michigan staffers. They gave it to the NCAA. That tells me, why would outside investigators have this stuff? It's the Matt Weiss thing.
Yeah, they were
so this, yes. And so that's where this all came from. So this could get really ugly.
Deep.
And just the stuff that's being alleged, if even half of this stuff is true, this is going to be really bad. But again, it comes down to how quickly can you make a decision on this? How quickly can you give Michigan a hearing on this? And do you really want the additional black eye? Because here's what could happen. You tell Michigan this week, hey, you're not playing in the playoff. And then Michigan does what? They're going to sue. They're going to appeal and sue, and they're going to do all that kind of stuff. And now you're in this world now.
Yeah.
I really believe that they're going to let the next month play out and just keep talking, and we're investigating, we're looking into this. And I just think the people in the Big Ten headquarters are just going to be doing this, Ryan. Please, Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State, handle this for us. Please handle this for us. Don't make us make this decision. Knock Michigan out.
I hope the NCAA is not depending on Penn State to win a big football game. I hope that's not real.
It's not the NCAA. It's got to be the Big Ten. The Big Ten's the one that's got to make this decision. You can't represent us in the Big Ten championship game and in the college football playoff. Right. And so that's what they've got to hope is just please somebody else handle it. Because I think now if Michigan loses to Ohio State, now I don't care if they're 11-1. Now the committee has all the reason they need to leave Michigan out on their own. Terrible schedule. Had one good win all year, and you lost to the best team you played by far. They need Ohio State so bad to go out and meet Michigan because if they do what I think, which is wait, and Michigan wins out, now you're screwed. Now you're not going to leave an undefeated team that your best chance to get into the playoff because what's it ultimately all about, Ryan? It's this right here, man. It's all about the money. There's no way. And here's the deal. Scandal's good for business for people who care about clicks and eyes. And when this is nothing but, generating revenue, Michigan's a story. And so I don't think ESPN's going to want that to happen. They're going to want Michigan in the playoff because they can talk about it for the next month.
Man, Michigan beat writers right now who aren't Michigan fans are probably loving this right now, man. They're
Yes.
like, we're getting so
Yes.
much business right now.
Oh,
They're gonna read
absolutely.
everything right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy. It's gonna get because like the whole thing, like with the Matt Weiss thing, they're like, the computer fraud and hacking. You're like, what is that about? Like, what is that even
Yeah.
about? Well, now we're starting to maybe think maybe this is what this was about.
Yeah, there's a lot
So
more
it's
here,
it's
probably.
it's getting crazy,
That's what
man.
usually happens with these types of investigations, man. Is like you think it's about one thing, and then you're like, wow, look at all the stuff we found. There's a lot more here than we
Hmm.
originally thought. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be
agreed.
ugly.
Whew, man.
Nathan Melton went back to back. What is Michigan's record if they were stealing signs, if they didn't have the advantage of knowing what the other team is running? It's
So
impossible to know
Ryan,
for a
this
degree.
this this is like this is an interesting thing because I was listening to a political guy that I really enjoy listening to, and I've gotten to know a little bit, and he's talking about how basically like this isn't why Michigan is winning, and these things don't matter, and you can and I was like, I disagree because when it's a pretty evenly contested game, and you know exactly what the other team is about to run, like sometimes they're still going to beat you. But in an evenly contested game, that's going to give you a clear advantage.
Sure.
Does that mean that they would have lost to anyone other than Ohio State? I don't know because I still watched the Ohio State game and I said, yeah, Michigan knew what was coming, but they still physically beat Ohio State's butt in that
Yeah.
game.
Well, it's
You
like 2
know,
years ago. It's like Aiden Hutchinson didn't you didn't need a sign for Aiden Hutchinson to just beat your butt all game, right?
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's given Michigan an advantage, and perhaps they would have. Maybe there's a reason Michigan hasn't looked like the same defensive football team in the playoff when they haven't been able to study a team as much as they have the regular season. I don't know,
Sure.
but I don't know that it would have changed their record dramatically. Like maybe a game per year or two
Right.
at the
Right.
most. But those were still pretty good Michigan teams, and I don't know how much it would have changed it.
Right.
It's
Right.
kind of
And
it's
and
kind of
and
like
their
guys who are great, like Barry.
schedule's soft too. I mean, it's just yeah. Yeah.
Right. And the other, it's like Barry Bonds going on steroids. It's like, why? You were a Hall of Famer before you went on
You were
steroids. It's just
really good
because,
before steroids. Yep.
like, I mean, he was a phenomenal, I mean, Gold Glove outfielder, could steal bases, and then he just decided, he saw all these home runs being hit, and he decided he wanted to get some of that action. I guess I don't know,
Yeah.
but I mean, they were going to be a pretty good team anyway. This just gave them
Yep.
an even greater advantage, and maybe it's just so hard for me to say if how it would have changed outcomes. I just don't know. Maybe against Ohio State, if they didn't know what plays were being called, maybe they would have called different plays and Ohio State starts off better. I have no idea how to judge that, Ryan. I have no idea how to gauge
There's
that and
some
evaluate that.
yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, it's just because there's like so much like self-inflicted stuff with Ohio State the last couple years too. It's
Right.
like again, Aiden Hutchinson getting turned loose, like you just beat your butt.
Right.
JJ McCarthy making a couple throws last year. The busted coverage is because you knew the sign. Like I don't believe
Well,
that
I mean,
part.
like
I don't
maybe
believe
they
that
knew what
part.
Ohio State was going to be in, and they felt that this call they could. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. It's like it's so hard to evaluate. I could make a case for it. You can make a case against it. I can make
Yeah.
a case against. You can make a case for it. It's just so hard to know. But the fact of
Yeah.
the matter is, but when you do things that give yourself a clear competitive advantage,
Yeah.
it's not going to matter in 9 of the games you play because you're just way better than that team.
Right.
But it could
Well, it's going to
have an
matter
impact.
against UNLV this year. Like you're going to beat
Right.
UNLV regardless of
Right.
whatever. So, yeah.
But could it have mattered last year against Penn State?
Sure.
Maybe it was a close game at halftime, and
Yeah.
could it have mattered? In a trying to think of even some games that were competitive in 2021. Could it have mattered in the Rutgers game? They only by a touchdown, maybe. Nebraska game, you only won by 3, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
Penn State, you only won by 4. I'm looking at 2021, you only won that by 4. Those are games that to me that like I hear a lot of Ohio State fans complaining. I don't think Ohio State's the team that has a right to complain here. I think Rutgers has a right to complain. I think Nebraska does. I think Penn State does. Teams that have actually been more competitive
It's close
against Ohio
games,
State.
yeah.
And then last year's Ohio State game, maybe because it was close at least at halftime. I think Ohio State led at halftime, right? Where
Yeah, it was like
2021,
17-14 or something.
yeah, Ohio State didn't lose to Michigan in 2021 because they knew signs. They got their butts physically kicked in 2021. So it's interesting, but I just can't quantify. I know it gives you an advantage. That's why they're doing it.
Well, and are they
how
only
would it change
stealing?
the record? No idea.
Yeah, I mean, and like the whole thing is that like they've been stealing signs throughout the year too, right? Like they've been going to games and like self-scouting and doing that type of thing too, right? So it's like I don't know. There's just so much there. You have to unpack it, man. You really have to
Yeah.
unpack it.
It's like they showed the paper that they have of literally the signalers, like what this call means that it's like, God, that's just so blatant cheating. Like everybody keeps saying, well, sign stealing is not illegal. Guys, that's not the problem. No one is saying, well, they're stealing signs from our sideline. That's not the issue. That's part of the game. We've talked about this. And then somebody had this really weird take, like, well, with all the cell phones at games now, that shouldn't be a rule. I'm like, no, that's the opposite. Because of all the cell phones that now should be a rule that you can't look at that stuff. Like, there's things that are rules, right? Where if somebody says, hey, I'm presenting this to you of something I took at a game, if you're another team, say, guys, I can't look at that. I can't do that. I can't be part of that. So you can send me all the film you want, but I'm not going to look at it. I can't do that. That's against the rules. We'll get in trouble for that. You know, I mean, you get stuff presented to you all the time. Boosters come to you, hey, you know, we want to give this kid X amount of dollars. Man, I can't do that, man. That's illegal. That's against the rules. You can either do that or you can say, yeah, sure, go do it. Just don't tell me about it next time.
Right.
You know, but with what we're hearing now, there's no way coaches didn't know. No way. No way. This isn't just some fan that was going to games. This is a dude that's on the Michigan sidelines right by the coordinators, letting them know what's coming. Like this is beyond the pale, man. It's a bad look. Bad look.
Bad. I have a feeling that maybe Jim Harbaugh might be out and lead to better pastures. This guy.
Well, hold on, because you said that. That's a very interesting question. Because my whole thing is, this is supposedly something that started happening in 2021. Remember, Jim Harbaugh thought that was going to be his last year at Michigan.
Right.
I mean, he was telling people during the season that he was it. He was going to the NFL, and then the NFL thing fell through. So I don't know that he intended this to be a 3-year thing, but kind of like, but then once it starts, you can't just turn that that valve off, Ryan. It's kind of going, you know, and then you're going to fire the guy you hired for a year to do that. I mean, I wonder how that factored into it, because we heard for a long time, like all 2021, that Jim Harbaugh was planning on going back to the NFL.
Yep.
And then when that fell through, I mean, it's wild. The whole thing is wild. Anyway, let's get to this question.
US MA87 says, I've heard you discuss tracks for running back. Is that why you see a running back run into a lineman when there is a gaping hole just to the left or the right of the lineman?
Well, that's partly. I mean, that's also a running back that's not making the proper read.
Right.
But he's running into him. Yes, you are on a track. So like what that basically means is like, so I'll use stretch as an example, Ryan. I don't know how you guys taught stretch, but when we taught stretch, the aiming point was the inside hip of the tight end or tackle, or the inside hip of the tight end or outside hip of the tackle if it was an open formation. So if it was a closed formation, which means we had a tight end, it was inside hip of the tight end. If it was an open formation, which means no tight end, we're running it to the short side, it's the outside hip of the tackle. We rarely ever did that. We always would run stretch to a tight end. And so as the offensive line is moving, you're still staying on your track to the inside hip of the tight end. So it's not like the inside hip of where the tight end is lined up and then you stay on that track as he's moving out. No, you stay on the track until whatever your read key is causes you to make a read. So, you know, people will teach it different ways. You know, I've been on teams say, hey, you see color, you make your cut away from it. So basically, if I'm blocking you inside zone and my guy goes here, you're seeing his color jersey, you know you're cutting this way if I'm the read key. And if he goes this way, then you're going this way. And people will teach it verbally different, but it's the same thing. So you stay on that track until your read tells you where to go. Stay on it, stay on it, stay on it, be patient. And then when you see a hole open up, boom, you hit it. And yeah, that's sometimes why a guy run in, because he's like, there's no hole. So I'm just staying on my track and I just run right into a guy.
I'm gonna hide behind an offensive lineman at times too.
Yes,
so yeah,
exactly. And that's why you'll see guys like put their hands on a blocker and just kind of follow them, right? Because it's like my hole's not there yet, and I'm setting up his block. I'm setting up his block, because that's the other thing is if you stay on track, you're now you've got a better chance of setting up the block and the cut you want by keep pressing, because the minute you stop pressing the inside hip of the tight end, for example, they now know we don't have to keep pursuing for width. He's now made his decision. the longer you stay on that track, the more they have to read, the more chance you have to give your guys a chance to get up to the second level, to make the blocks you need for your vertical insertion. So, yes, that's kind of what that's. I mean, I still say guys are running into linemen a lot of times just because they didn't have great vision on that play, or a guy got driven back more so than it was because you were staying on track. But you're staying on track, and that's still why you're going to hit that guy. So
that's why I always love zone, man. Inside zone is just like there's a track, but there's not actually a track. You know what I mean? It's like it usually hits backside A. Like
the track is a timing mechanism, right? And that's what I always taught with inside zone is the footwork and the track. It's a timing mechanism. If you cut too soon, it's not going to work. If you cut too late, it's not going to work. Stay on your path and then read it out, and then boom, you hit it, right? And so, it's we ran inside zone. When I was at Muhlenberg, Ryan, we ran inside zone all the time, but we did it. We were an under center team, and so like we had open, cross, plant, get vertical was our timing mechanism. Well, if you just open and then got vertical, you were getting downhill too quickly. If you took that third step for width, you were getting downhill too slow. But you have an aiming point. And the aiming point is designed to set you up to make the read and then put you in position to hit the hole. And holes will hit different. Like gap schemes are going to hit differently than zone schemes. Zone schemes are require more kind of like jump cut type things at times. And so, but yeah, it's one of my fun things to teach was that kind of stuff. And the guys that have a really good feel for the game at running back, they know how to master that stuff. They just have great timing with it. They really do.
Yep. Yeah, Johnny S. Early New Year's Six Bowl projection shows Notre Dame versus Washington in the Peach Bowl. What are your thoughts, Brian and Ryan? I mean, it'd be a great test. Washington's a good football team, right? I mean, offensively, they have a lot of pass catchers. They have a pretty good offensive line. They have a quarterback playing on a high level in that scheme. They have a defense that has guys pretty much everywhere. I mean, especially on the defensive line, they have guys like Braylon Trice up front. It would be a great test, and I think that it would really test the progress of Notre Dame. If Notre Dame is able to finish out the season and play with good momentum down the stretch, I would love to see him against a Washington team because I think that that's a team that will show just how much progress you have made. And it's also Washington's got a nice brand going right now. They got some fanfare behind them. If you're able to go into a Peach Bowl and beat a team like Washington, it's a statement victory. It's a statement victory, especially going into next season. So I would like it. I think it would be a fun game.
It's a very interesting matchup, Ryan, when you consider it's arguably the best pass offense in college football against arguably the best pass defense in college football. And then you ask, who's playing in that game? Does Cam Hart play in that game? Does Rome Odunze play in that game? Does Michael Penix play in that game? There's so many questions about it that you just don't know. But I love the matchup because you say, we handled USC. This is a different team than USC. They don't have the quarterback that USC has. Their quarterback is completely different. He's just run the offense kind of guy, not the playmaker. They have better receivers than USC has, like individual receivers than USC has. Their run game's not as good as USC's, but their offensive line is better pass pro than USC. So it's a much different look. And then it really would then come down to, in my opinion, the Notre Dame offense. That's really what it comes down to because Washington's defense is solid, but it's not great. And that's kind of what makes them good this year is their defense is better, so they can make more stops. And so it'd be a fascinating matchup. I've seen that one. I think it was Fox Sports had that one, Johnny. I saw a couple people had the Holiday Bowl against Florida or LSU or against LSU, or no, it was Kansas and Kansas State. Others had the ReliaQuest Bowl, which was against LSU. And then there was one that had the Gator Bowl against Florida. So I've seen a lot of different matchups, and all of those, all the ones against SEC teams in Washington are very intriguing matchups. Very intriguing matchups. Backup says, I just had a vision of Malik Murphy in a Notre Dame uniform next season. I highly doubt that one happens. There wasn't a relationship really with Malik beforehand. And I don't know that that's necessarily the route that would make sense for Notre Dame to go. Now, I will say this. I'm more open to it now potentially than I would have been a week ago. And the reason why is because I don't care how talented the kid is. If you're going to play a talented, unproven quarterback, then just play the talented, unproven quarterbacks you're already going to have. Play Kenny Minchie, play CJ Carr, play one of those guys. I don't want to see them going to the portal for a highly ranked guy that hasn't proven himself. Now, here's where this kind of changes a little bit, is because now you're in a situation where Malik Murphy is going to get a few starts under his belt. And he's going to get those. I think I saw that with Quinn Ewers, he's probably going to be out at least 2 to 3 weeks. I think is the last I saw. I could be wrong on that, but I believe that's the last thing I read. So he's going to start this weekend against BYU. Then he gets a chance to play against Kansas State and potentially TCU at least. And so he'll have some film. But again, it's backup quarterback film. And I don't know if that necessarily tells you exactly what he's going to do when he's got to be the guy. So I just get always nervous about that. I love Malik Murphy's talent, but I just need to see a more veteran quarterback. Notre Dame's going to have very talented, raw, young quarterbacks on the roster next year. Play them if you're going to play an unproven guy. Play them. Don't go outside to get another unproven quarterback. Go outside to get a proven quarterback. That's what I want to see if Notre Dame is going to go to the portal. And I fully expect them to go to the portal next year. It's just, are they going for a starter? Or are they going for a backup? I think that's the bigger question at this point in time. Got a question from Irish Blooded. With quarterback for next year, how much, if any, do you feel having game one being on the road, especially at an SEC school, can play in a starter selection? I think it plays a lot into it, but it's going to be different than past years because of the new expansion of the college football playoff. And what I mean is this, is in the past, you were almost forced to go to the portal for at least a quarterback that can play early. Maybe one of your young guys can beat him out at some point in time, because you could not afford an early season loss, because now you're in win or go home mode the rest of the year. You can't afford to lose another game. Now Notre Dame is in a situation, and the rest of college football is in a situation where if you catch a loss in week one, and let's say you go on the road and you lose to A&M, you can still afford to lose one more game and still have a pretty good shot at getting to the college football playoff. And so to me, it's almost like in the past, this scenario would have forced you to almost get a veteran, play a veteran. Now it's kind of like, hey, we've got this talented kid. Let's give him a shot to go on the road. Let's see what he does, because if we lose, we're still okay. The schedule the next month, you've got like Northern Illinois, you've got Purdue, you've got Miami of Ohio, you've got Louisville and Stanford, all winnable games. Louisville's the toughest during that stretch. And you can get your young guy going. And look, Texas A&M's going to be losing some dudes to the NFL as well. So, they're going to be a little bit of a different team. So I think that the expansion of the playoff has to change teams' thinking about how you handle the portal in regard to your early season schedule. And it maybe could be, hey, let's start Angeli or a veteran portal guy early, because we don't want Kenny or CJ's first start to be a road game at Kyle Field. Okay, that's fine, as long as you're willing to quickly turn to that guy. But I think now I'd say if that kid's your best player, don't be afraid to play him, because if he doesn't play great that first game, you're still okay. You still have plenty of opportunities. You get Florida State at home, you get USC, you get Louisville, you got plenty of opportunities to go out and get statement wins, where at 11-1, 10-2, you're pretty much a shoo-in to be a college football playoff team, because your first loss is going to be week one. Nobody's going to care, because we've seen that the September losses don't get impacted as much as October, November losses do. And Notre Dame will have a chance for some big name November wins next year too, Ryan. And so to me, it's about, I need to get my quarterback as whoever that's going to be, whoever we think gives us the best chance to be great in November. I'm giving that guy a chance to take his lumps in September and August and September, because if you have two losses, let's just say hypothetically, Notre Dame loses to A&M, beats Northern Illinois, beats Purdue, beats Miami, and let's just say hypothetically they lose to Louisville at home and they're sitting there at 3-2. You're going to add a game in there, but you've got chances in November to play Florida State at home and at USC. And then there's going to be another opponent. Those are November wins that'll, to me, get Notre Dame into that top 11 where they need to be, in my opinion. And that's assuming worst case scenario for September, which is 2 losses in September. So I feel the way that the schedule sets up, that if I got a really talented young kid and my only knock on him compared to the others is he's just not experienced, then play him. Let him get that experience, because it's going to benefit you in November when Florida State comes to town and when you head out to California to play USC. It's going to benefit you a great deal. And so that's how I would handle it
Well,
personally.
it's not only going to just benefit you for the 2024 season, it's also going to benefit you long term. I mean, Kyle Field is a hostile environment. I mean, it's why they call it the 12th man, right? So I think that if a quarterback can go in there and even if he doesn't play well, but he's still able to just ride through the highs and the lows of that type
Handle
of
the moment.
stadium, of that type of fan base, I mean, you can handle everything, in my opinion, at that point, right? Like, I mean, that's one of the that stadium literally like it it has sometimes it can what you call it on like the Richter scale, right? As far as like
Yes.
you
The
feel
shaking.
like the shaking of it, right? Like it can process on there. So if you can go through that type of game and if you are successful, then it's like that's a it's an environment to do it, right? So I think that it's very beneficial for a young quarterback, honestly.
Yep. Agree.
We had a question from one for the Gipper. Is Pitt's coach your least favorite coach in college football? Oh no, no,
No, not even
not at all.
close.
Not even
No.
close.
My disdain for Pat Narduzzi is more of an annoyance. It's like, dude, I would actually respect you if you just shut up and stop whining about
Yeah,
Notre
he just
Dame.
talks too much. He just talks too much. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
but I respect how he runs his program,
I think he's a
right?
good coach. Like he
Yes.
just talks way too much. Yeah. Yep.
Yes. Like, whereas there's other guys, like, I just really dislike Dan Lanning. I
Brett
really
Venables. I dislike Brett
yes.
Venables a lot.
I
I do.
really dislike Hugh Freeze as a human being. I think he's a total fraud,
Sure.
Brian Kelly. I would much rather hang out with Pat Narduzzi than Brian Kelly. Like, uh,
Yes.
much rather hang out with Pat Narduzzi than Jimbo Fisher, right?
I've
Like,
actually
I
heard that
mean,
Pat Narduzzi is a great person, which is yeah. So yeah,
wouldn't shock me. That's what I'm saying.
just
Like,
needs
I'd
to
much
stop
rather go
talking
out
to
to
the
dinner with
media.
him than some of those other guys. Like, just and here's the thing is like, not only does he take shots at Notre Dame, but like, dude, those aren't even well thought out thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, if you think that's going to help convince Notre Dame to join the conference, you're not real bright. And I don't think that's why he's doing it. I think he's doing it just because he's, Vince. And I think the other thing too is he didn't like Notre Dame partly because he didn't like Brian Kelly. Because I know
Sure.
that I've been told by people over the years that D'Antonio Narduzzi felt slighted by how some comments that Brian Kelly made about the team he inherited at Cincinnati. Because he took over for D'Antonio. And D'Antonio did okay at Cincinnati, but he didn't light the world on fire. But he did leave Brian Kelly with the roster that Brian Kelly was then able to go turn into a pretty darn good football program. You know what I mean? And he took him to a couple bowl games, and Kelly would make comments. I've been told, and I don't know. I was told that he made some comments about how that were disrespectful to the staff he took over for, and that's why Narduzzi and D'Antonio don't like him very much. Okay, whatever. That's fine. Get out of your feelings. That doesn't have anything to do with Notre Dame. That's about Brian Kelly, But as far as like as a coach, I think he does a really nice job at Pitt. I do. And I think he believes in the things that for the most part I think you need to believe in, and as far as toughness and discipline and playing the game the right way and stuff like that. And so no, there's a lot of coaches I dislike more than him. He's probably just the most annoying coach when it comes to Notre Dame specifically, in my opinion. Got a super chat down here, Ryan.
Brandon Plesner says, saw Colorado got their quarterback of the future. Would you rather have, and who has the higher ceiling, Antoine Hill or Deuce Knight? I'm conflicted. I love both.
Personally, for me, I'd go Deuce Knight, and it's not, and this was true at the very beginning. I think Antoine Hill has arguably the best just God-given arm in the 25 class, arguably. He just has an absolute bazooka attached to his right shoulder.
Yeah,
but I don't know that he's a natural passer.
I was going to say, I think Deuce is a much more natural thrower than Antoine
Yeah.
Hill. And Antoine Hill's arm is stupid.
It's insane. But yes, Deuce is a much more natural thrower, natural reader, has more understanding of how to change arm angles and arm speeds and ball placement. And he's still raw experientially. I think Deuce has a pretty good football IQ. I'm not saying Antoine doesn't. I'm just saying he's really raw. I think also Deuce is more of a I like him better as a runner because I like Antoine's a power runner as a quarterback.
Yeah.
Deuce is more of a slippery, make you miss kind of guy.
Faster too.
Yeah.
I think he's a little faster than Antoine Hill. Yeah.
So I would take Deuce. And honestly, Brandon, I think you guys know me well enough to know that I'd admit it if this was not the case. I'd tell you the truth. I felt this way even before when it was still they were still figuring out their board. I mean,
Yeah.
Deuce was part of a group of 3 guys that I looked at and said, boy, if you can get one of those 3 guys, you're going to get a special quarterback. And it was Bryce Underwood, George McIntyre, and Deuce Knight. That was my 3. That was my now. Would I have been thrilled if Deuce Knight went to Tennessee and their name got Antoine Hill? I'd be happy about that because again, because you got CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie in back-to-back classes, you can take a chance on a super high ceiling kid like Antoine Hill. But if you ask my preference, my A group, like my star group, was Bryce, George, and Deuce. And then Antoine Hill was kind of in that next group of really good players that if you can get one of those guys, you're still pretty good. But Deuce to me is the higher floor. You could say maybe Antoine Hill has the higher ceiling because of the arm strength, but even then I don't know because it's not like Deuce has a weak arm. Deuce has a pretty strong arm too.
It's very strong.
I just feel Deuce over all around is the best. The only thing that Antoine to me has over Deuce when it comes to tools that matter, because I don't think arms. I mean, Joe, if you want to know why I say arm strength doesn't matter, just watch Joe Milton. Like Joe Milton is exactly what you and I said he was going to be, Ryan, during the offseason, right? Great arm, not a quarterback. Like the only thing that he has that matters is he's got a better frame. He's got a much thicker frame than Deuce. And that's my only concern about Deuce. The experience will come. He's got the rest of this year in high school. He's got 7-on-7. He's got all of next year in high school. But he's a skinny kid. Deuce is a skinny kid. Antoine is got a great. He's going to be a 240 plus pound kid when it's all said and done. So he's got that big bodied frame that I like as well. That's the only thing right now of the traits that truly matter the most to me, because Antoine's got a stronger arm than Deuce, but arm strength is not an issue I have with Deuce. I mean, Deuce's arm is definitely stronger than CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie's, especially CJ's, right? I mean, significantly so. He probably has just pure arm strength. Mm-hmm. The best arm strength that at that age that Notre Dame's had since probably Deshaun Kaiser, Brandon Wimbush, like those guys. I mean, just arm power. And as he fills out, Ryan, it's only getting stronger. He's just got to learn those other parts of the game now.
I think that Antoine Hill is the ultimate, because I think that some people think that Deuce Knight's a little bit of boomer bust as far as like, is he going to reach that ceiling? But Antoine Hill is the ultimate boomer bust. Like, we've seen some of those guys turn out well. We've also seen a lot of those guys bust and not be great players. So, if you
the first one that pops in my head, Ryan, Quincy Patterson. It's the first guy that pops in my head because everybody raved about look at the arm and the body, and he was a terrible quarterback. Terrible. Isn't he like some FC? Yes, and he's not even playing. Yeah. He's not even
starting now. He's starting now for EJ Warner got hurt, I think, so he's starting.
Okay, so he wasn't the starter until guy got hurt. I mean, it's just it's not good. It's not good. Yeah. All right, let's get to this next one here. Good question though, Brandon. Ryan, this is supposed to say I'll miss, not I missed, but I'll miss. He corrected it in a later thing.
Gotcha. I'll miss the recruiting show. What is Notre Dame's hardest position to recruit for?
You want to start with that, Ryan? I should have read. Actually, I don't know why I had you read it. I should have just read it since it was a recruiting question.
Good.
My bad.
You're good. I guess cornerback has gotten a lot better. It's not an issue. Quarterback is not an issue. I guess wide receiver still has its problems, Joe. But I mean, even that, Notre Dame's finding answers to it. I mean, I think that you still need to convince some guys to gamble on Notre Dame at wide receiver a little bit, but even that, they're getting the Jaden Greathouses, the Braylon Jameses, the Cam Williams. Like even that, they're recruiting well. I guess that or interior defensive line would probably be my other one.
Where I
guys
would go.
That you're, consistently, you need to get better at recruiting that, especially moving forward, because a lot of those guys go and play in the SEC. They go down south and they stay down there and they want to go down there because they want to play. Because right now, Georgia's, the Alabamas, those types of schools, like they're putting out defensive linemen seemingly every year. They're going to go high in the draft and start in the NFL. So that's a battle that you still need to figure out.
And here's how I answer the question, Joe. I will tell you the position that I think is hardest based on, even if Notre Dame is doing it the right way, it's harder. Like receiver to me has never been a position I thought was hard for Notre Dame to recruit. It's a position that at times they recruited poorly. But whenever they've had a good, like when they had Mike Denbrock as the receivers coach, I mean, they were getting big-time receivers all the time. I mean, go look at the 15 and 16 receiving cores. And those were loaded receiving cores. And so it's more of when you have a recruiting coach, a guy who's not just doing the job. That's been more of the issue over the years. Same with quarterback. It's not that Notre Dame can't recruit quarterback. Yes, they can. They went through a little struggle from like 16 to like 21 where they were getting some guys who were like, I don't know about that. But, you get things change. You're able to all of a sudden start recruiting quarterback again. And now Notre Dame's going to get 3 studs in a row. So the position that I think is harder for Notre Dame consistently is defensive tackles, period, and then highly ranked edge players. And part of the reason too is because those guys, especially nowadays, are positions where they're a premium position. And now that NIL is a thing, more people are willing to buy them.
Yeah.
And if NIL wasn't a thing, I think Elijah Rushing takes a much deeper look at Notre Dame. A much deeper look. May not have still picked Notre Dame, but now all of a sudden when you're just basically buying players, Notre Dame's not going to get into that game. Some of those guys are going to be harder to get. And so I think defensive line overall, but really interior is always going to be a struggle for the reasons Ryan talked about. Geographically, the type of kid that usually plays that position, what their focus tends to be. And that's what made Justin Scott such a huge miss because he wasn't a Southern guy. Now, I've got some feelings on Justin Scott's senior season and where his head is at right now and how great does he really want to be, but that's a lot of talent to work with. So that's a position that to me right now is the one that's just still the biggest question mark for me. And safety is an issue now, but it shouldn't be. Like it's not. It's a self-inflicted wound. Cornerback used to be an issue, and I'm concerned about once Mike Mickens leaves, does it continue to be, or is it just things have changed? That I still don't have an idea. But cornerback's one, Ryan, that also is it's harder to consistently get the higher ranked corners. I mean, Christian Gray is a bit of an anomaly. That top 150 corner that likes Notre Dame, he's an anomaly. Most kids are not like that. Most kids are like the AJ, what's his name? The kid I love, AJ Harris. Grew up a Notre Dame fan, loved Notre Dame, but as soon as he came down to recruiting, I'm going to the SEC. Just he's a Notre Dame kid, but just he wouldn't get Notre Dame. I mean, if it's up to his dad, he's in Notre Dame's class. He's at Notre Dame right now. But he had no interest. Even though he grew up a Notre Dame fan, because it's like, I'm a cornerback. I'm going to play in the SEC. That was it. But I don't really care about highly ranked kids. Give me Benjamin Morrisons and Christian Grays and Leonard Moores every year, and I'm going to have a great cornerback room.
Yeah. We had a question for Brandon Plesner. Says, BD, what weekly episode do you guys discuss the top college football matchups of the weekend? Is that the pre-recorded one on Fridays?
Well, we were doing that on this show, but what we noticed was when we'd start that segment, the numbers in the chat and the show would just drop. So just a lot of people would drop out. And so we were like, we just didn't think it was something that enough people were really all that interested in. So that's partly why we dropped. And then last week went Thursday off. We didn't have a show on Thursday. And then this week it's just kind of like there aren't a lot of games that I thought people really want to hear us talk about. And then also, I mean, the CFB Nation guys are going to have a show out later today that previews the games as well. So we'll still give you that taste. But yeah, that's kind of why.
We had a question from Archer452 says, if Notre Dame has fully joined the ACC when they did the current football deal, how many conference titles would they have right now, and would you pick them to win it this year?
Well, I would have preseason picked them to win it this year, and I still think they'd have a shot to beat Florida State, but Florida State's a little better than I thought they're going to be. I mean, I thought Florida State was – I think I picked Clemson just because I said I need to see Florida State prove it, even though we felt like Florida State had the better team. We just need to see them prove it, and Clemson's been worse than we thought. But, I mean, honestly, they wouldn't have won a lot just because – 13 and 14, they weren't going to beat Florida State. They didn't beat Florida State. They weren't definitely going to beat them at 13. 15, Notre Dame was pretty good. But that Clemson team beat them, right?
Yeah,
Notre Dame doesn't beat Clemson in 2016. And then 2017 is the one year when Clemson was really, really good where Notre Dame would have been the ACC champs. That's the year Notre Dame would have won the ACC that year, in my opinion. because that Clemson team wasn't great. Yeah, I know they lost to Miami, but that's one. Clemson lost to 4-8 Syracuse. I think Notre Dame would have smacked Clemson that year. That's why I was so pissed when they lost to Miami, because that team could have done damage in the playoff, Ryan. That team could have done real damage in the playoff if they didn't fall apart down the stretch. 18, they don't win it because Clemson would have beat them. 19, they wouldn't have won it, in my opinion, because Clemson would have beat them. And in 2020, they were in the ACC, and Clemson beat them.
Yeah.
21, maybe. But again, that wasn't a very good Notre Dame team in 2021. It wasn't.
I would not pick Notre Dame to win in 2021.
Maybe, but that was a down year in the ACC. It was like Wake Forest versus Pitt. Last year they could have definitely won it last year, in my opinion, if they were in the ACC all year. I mean, I thought Notre Dame pretty much dominated ACC teams last year. This year, it'd be them or Florida State. Yeah. So
probably not Florida a lot State of years. Being realistic, but yeah. It'd be close.
Not a lot of years I would have picked Notre Dame just because Clemson had those great teams and Florida State had those two great teams at the beginning. So 17 is the one year I think Notre Dame definitely would have won it. And then maybe last year. I mean, because like you say, well, Notre Dame lost to Marshall and Stanford. Guys, we've seen Pitt play in the ACC title game at 7-5, right? We've seen some bad teams play in that.
That's also a big difference too. Is like you're not predicting them to have necessarily the best record in the ACC either. They could just win the ACC championship game. That's how you win it, right?
Brian, if Notre Dame would have joined the ACC, there's no way they'd have put him in the same division as Florida State, Clemson, and Louisville. There's no way. Because now you're setting yourself up to where you're never going to get Notre Dame against your other prime teams in the ACC title game. That's bad for business. That'd be stupid. So they would have put them in the Coastal and been like, let's get a bunch of Notre Dame versus whoever. Now, Notre Dame would have played in the ACC title game in most of those years. They would have played in the ACC title game in 14. If they could have stayed healthy, they'd have played it in 15. They'd have played it in 17. They'd have played it in 18. They'd have played in it probably in 19. They would have played in it in 20, which they did. But they just would have lost those games a lot of years. That would have been the issue because those are some great Clemson teams. Great Clemson teams.
Clemson was wild there for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
John Climack, Coach Marcus Freeman's press conference was interesting. It sounds like a decision on a transfer quarterback will be made next bye week.
No, it won't. Like I've read. No,
I'm confused on what that means.
I think maybe they'll say I'll have to go back and read it, but I don't think that's what he's saying. Because how can you possibly make that decision? You don't know who's going to be in the portal. I mean that's the thing. It's like you don't know who's going to be in the portal. So how can you possibly know without seeing what he said? This is just my reaction. Without seeing what he said, my guess would be he's going to say by the next bye week, we're going to have an idea if we feel like these kids are ready to go compete. Because the decision has to be made whether you're going to go into the portal by the time the regular season's over. Because that's when kids start jumping into the portal. Yeah. You have to know, are we going to go in the portal or not? That's the decision that has to be made. I could see that being what is determined by the next bye week.
Sure.
So whether to do that, but not who the transfer quarterback will be, no, that's not going to happen because you don't know who's going to be in the portal. But I could see them saying, Kenny took a jump, we're good with the portal, or we're going to go to the portal for a veteran backup depth guy. Or they could say he's just not ready. He didn't build on the couple 3 weeks. You have to read the intel piece we put out. He's just not ready yet. Let's go find a guy. But no matter what decision they make, if they feel Kenny's ready, there's still a couple guys out there that if they got in the portal, Notre Dame would say, yeah, Kenny's ready, but this guy could be really, really, really good.
And that's how it always should be if you're a good team. Honestly, like, oh, that kid could help us. Cool. Let's go get him. You know what I mean? So. Next question was from the original Clyde the Glide. Do you guys think that Notre Dame should run reverses on kickoffs using Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price? Reverses? No. That means that's saying that you do it all the time, right? Would I hate if maybe at one point they run a reverse and take a team off guard in the right situation? Sure. I'd be cool with that. I'd be fine with that.
And then you could smoke it a couple times, Ryan, and now it's like you get them to pause, and that's your chance to go get a crease too. Because if you do hit it once, you can smoke it a couple times. Sorry, smoke means fake it. where you just have a guy run over and you just fake it. That's what I mean by that.
And also, the kickoff return unit has not been great overall outside of Jadarian, Price's big touchdown. So a little misdirection at times could be cool. I would not hate it, but not all the time, because then then you take the shock factor out of it, and now it becomes predictable. So you have to pick your spots.
Here's the question I do have, Ryan. So first of all, I kind of like doing different things in kick return as wrinkles to give people something to think about. Like, so I'm actually a fan of faking a reverse every now and then, doing a reverse every now and then, just to give them something to think about. That's my answer to that question. My other question is going to be, Ryan, I am very curious if what we saw against USC is the beginning of them getting better or just a specific USC, because there was like 3 times they returned kicks where I'm like, they were a block away from taking that one to the house. Like Devin Ford was the difference in Devin Ford's had a really good return, but his was actually kicked to the sideline. So there wasn't as much room to work as the one for Jadarian. But he had one that, man, it's like, dude, if they could have just got like one more guy blocked, he might have another 15, 20. He might got to midfield. And then there was one other, I think Jadarian had, where I'm like, one guy got free. And because at first I'm like, oh, goodness gracious, there's a hole there. And I don't know if you could see it on TV, but I just remember like at one point I like grabbed Vince's arm on one of the kick returns that didn't go, because I'm like, you saw the hole. And then just like it just closed up right before one guy missed it. Now, that could just be USC sucks at that, or they had a bad plan. Or it's like maybe Marty Biagi's figured it out, because, dude, you've got some dynamic return guys back there. Like, I'm hoping that this is the beginning of something really good. But right now, the USC game was an anomaly right now.
And it was so bad before that.
Yeah. Which leads to me, maybe you should have done something different. It's like it can't get worse other than maybe you fumble it. But that's the other thing, too, is you always run the risk of, you fumble that sucker, that's a really game-changing moment. Really game-changing moment.
We had a super chat from Brandon Plesner. Thank you so much, Brandon. It says, how vital is it for Notre Dame to find a good quality replacement for Miami next year? Only big-time home game is Florida State. It's brutal. Who would you like to realistically see?
I don't know that I need Notre Dame to find a really quality opponent, to be honest with you. Look, you've already got Texas A&M on your schedule. You've got Florida State on your schedule. You've got USC on your schedule. And you've got Louisville on your schedule. Louisville's going to be, I think, a really good football team next year, depending on who their quarterback is. But they're going to have a lot of skill coming back. And I'm telling you guys right now, Louisville is going to become a hot destination for kids leaving SEC schools that aren't playing, that are really talented, or smaller level schools that want to go. If you're a receiver, Ryan, at an FCS school or a lower level group of 5 team, and like the kid from UTSA last year, you're going to look around the country and you're like, dude, look what Jeff Brom's doing right now. Passing game year after year after year. Look at the numbers his offenses have put up, and he's doing it at Louisville. Got all these transfer kids come in, and they're balling. So you can clearly transfer there and make a quick transition. That's going to become a popular destination for wide receivers. I'm just telling you right now, it's going to. And so they're going to still be really good. They got a lot of guys coming back next year. So I know that the home schedule's not great, but if you're talking about building a schedule for a playoff run, I don't know that I want to add a Tennessee to a schedule that already has Texas A&M, USC, Florida State, and Louisville on it. I don't know that that's necessarily one of. Now, would I be okay adding an Indiana, a Northwestern? Sure. Iowa State? Sure. But I'm not adding another big time. You've already got to play a road game at an SEC school. You got to play a road game at USC, and you've got Florida State at home. I don't know that it's super imperative to add that, especially now. Brandon, my opinion might have changed if we were still on the 14 playoff, because I'd say you need to get another big win that you can win out if you're going to lose that A&M game. But now that you just need to be, you got to get to 11. That's all you got to get to is 11. If you're 11, you're basically guaranteed 10 actually kind of guarantees you, but especially with the Pac-12 being out now, you're much closer to being guaranteed a spot to get in if you're in the top 11. I'd say maybe 10, because then it gives you the benefit of one of the main 4 conferences is not ranked in the top 12, and they get that automatic bid. So you need to at least get to 10. I think that's safe. But there's no way more than two or, more than one of the SEC, Big 10, ACC, and Big 12 are going to be lower than 11 or 12, or lower than 12, right? So that's the only way that you could be 11th and not get in is because two of the automatic bids are ranked lower than you. But if you get to 10, Notre Dame at 10-2 against that schedule is probably a top 10 team.
Yeah.
They probably. Now, I'm not adding another MAC team because you already got two of them. But, I'm all for playing a group of five or a Power 5 team, but I'm just not adding Michigan or Penn State or Tennessee or anybody like that to the schedule. I don't think there's a lot of benefit to that, in my opinion. So
take a little break, man. If it was a tough schedule they've had this year too, they'll take a little bit, take a little step back. So it works.
Yeah. And the 25 schedule is going to be pretty rough as well. I mean, you're going to have Texas, and there's still 2 games to add, but you've got Texas A&M. You got to play at Arkansas. You have USC at home. You got to play at Miami, at Pitt, and you've got a home game against NC State and Syracuse. So, you're going to see at least one more really good team added to that. So I'm fine just adding a decent team, but not a great team.
Yeah, Johnny S says, at what point do we start the weaning off of the transfer portal and start developing in-house? I'm assuming this is about quarterbacks, right? I'm assuming that's what this conversation is about.
I would think so. Yeah. It just depends on the development of the current players you have. I mean,
well, you're going to have next year, you're going to have a redshirt sophomore, a redshirt freshman, and a freshman. So it needs to be over the next couple of years, right? As far as like the development window for those guys. So, yeah.
To me, Ryan, I think you have to go to the portal this year again. I'll say it. I just don't know that you necessarily have to get another Sam Hartman in the portal or, a guy that's a definite you're coming in to start kind of guy because of the talent I like. But look, if let's say Kenny Minchie goes out in the spring and beats out Steve Angeli, I would hope that Steve Angeli stays, but it's not a given because, and you know what shook me on that, Ryan? It's Drew Pine leaving. I never would have dreamed that Drew Pine was going to leave Notre Dame like that because of not starting. Never would have dreamed of it. And so if Drew Pine's going to leave, then I won't be shocked if Steve Angeli leaves. Now, I'm not saying Steve is going to leave. I don't have intel. I don't know Steve. I don't know Steve's coach. I don't know Steve's family. I'm just saying this as I watch college football, and you have to at least be prepared for it. That's all I'm saying. Hopefully Steve stays. I hope Steve doesn't leave. I think from everything I hear, he's a great teammate. The kids love him. He's just not as good as those other kids and has a much lower ceiling than those other kids. So if he gets beat out by Kenny and he leaves, now, we decided not to go to the portal. Now you've got Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr. That's it. So you're going to have to go to the portal no matter, or what if Steve stays and one of those 3 guys gets hurt?
Yeah.
Now you're young. You're going to have to go to the portal for a quarterback. I think what will be determined is what type of quarterback, which will be determined by how the young guys develop and be determined by who's in the portal.
Sure.
And I still think that's the bigger question. Like, I know you like Cameron Ward a lot, and he's a very talented player, but like, I don't know that I'm bringing him in to stunt that growth and development. I don't know that I would. I liked Hudson Card. I would have gone and taken him this year if Sam Hartman wasn't on the table. And I'd have been happy with Hudson Card because of where Notre Dame was a quarterback. I'm not taking Hudson Card next year to come in and start. I'm just not. Like, I need a guy that, can start if he can, but I'm not bringing in here necessarily to be that guy. You'll get a chance to compete, but I'm not necessarily bringing in that guy because I want to develop Kenny and I want to develop CJ and I want to develop Steve, but I need depth. So I'm thinking of like a Hunter Thompson, Tristan Gebbia, that kind of guy. I'm not bringing in now, as I've said before, if Riley Leonard jumps in the portal, we're going to have a conversation about that. If Caleb Williams decides he wants to stay in college and doesn't want to be at USC, he likes Notre Dame. Hey, I got my butt kicked by you guys. I want to play with you guys. Okay. All right, let's roll. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. You know what I mean? But I just don't know if there's going to be those guys out there this year, Ryan. I just don't know who they're going to be.
We'll see. We'll know in a few weeks.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, T. Smith, what Notre Dame quarterback or players left college too early for the NFL? I personally think Kevin Austin and Deshaun Kaiser. Kevin Austin absolutely left way too early. Yeah.
There's a lot of those guys, over the years that have left a year too early. I've had people tell me that they thought Tom Carter should have stayed for one more year. He's a first-round pick, but he just wasn't quite ready. I mean, guy was a first-round pick. I really can't argue with that, but more recently, I thought Miles Boykin made a foolish decision, in my opinion, to be honest with you, to come to leave after just 1 year of good production, not even great production. I would have loved to have seen a 2019 receiving core with Miles Boykin, Cole Kmet, and Chase Claypool. Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
That'd have been fun to watch. Certainly would have beat Georgia. There's no doubt about that. I don't know if they'd have shown up for the Michigan game, but they certainly would have beat Georgia. I thought Miles left too early. I thought he just needed more production, more consistency. Deshaun Kaiser left too early, but I still say that was an addition by subtraction, just because of the lack of leadership and the lack of football character and just some of the other maturity issues that Deshaun had. Now, if Deshaun would have taken well to the new staff and grown up and done all that, then sure, I would have loved to have had Deshaun Watson back in 2017. Absolutely.
Kaiser.
But there was no evidence that he was going to be that guy at
Sure.
that point in time. But trying to think of some others, Ryan.
I mean, hindsight is 2020. I don't
Yeah.
blame for Darius Walker for leaving early, but like he
No.
ended up going undrafted and not sticking. So I mean,
But here's the thing: he'd have gone undrafted the next year too, because he'd have got a brains beat in running behind that offensive line. Like,
Sure.
I mean, because here's the deal about Darius: he was never going to be any faster than he was. I mean, he was who he was. But I mean, what I try to look at is guys that I felt left early when they left early, that it was too early. Like, I don't like doing the whole hindsight 20. If I thought a guy should have left, I don't bash him when it doesn't work out. I try not to. Trying to think of some guys that left early that should not have. I mean, no quarterbacks. Oh, Jimmy Clausen. Jimmy Clausen should have come back for one more year. And I thought that at the time. I thought having him come back, because he was going to get dinged because of the injuries. He was going to play on a better team. I think he should have come back. I definitely thought he should have come back. Golden Tate, I would have loved to have him come back, but I mean, after the season he had in 2009, I mean, there was no way he was going to top that the next year. With Michael Floyd back healthy, with Kyle Rudolph, I mean, there was no way he's going to top that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Any offensive linemen? No. Ronnie Stanley shouldn't have come back. Quentin Nelson shouldn't have come back. I was fine with Aaron Banks leaving a year early. I really can't think of any offensive linemen off the top of my head that I thought should have come back, Ryan. Defensive linemen, no, I can't think of any, because Khalid didn't have a year. He didn't have an extra year. He couldn't have come back.
Tuitt was a second-round pick, right, when he left early?
Right. I mean, you could have argued he could have come back, but I mean, at the time, I thought it made sense for him to leave. I mean,
he had a good NFL career too before the injuries, so it worked out.
Yeah. Same with Lewis Nix. I think Lewis could have had a fifth year. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. No, 13 was his fifth year, actually. Because he was a 2010 kid. So he had a fifth year option, but I mean, I didn't have any issue with him leaving at the time. It made sense. He was a third round pick. So I really can't think of any others off the top of my head. I mean, Kyle Hamilton should have left. I mean, I didn't have any problem with him leaving. I think he nailed the two. I think he nailed the biggest one, Deshaun. Kevin Austin is the big one. Like, him and Miles Boykin, to me, are the two most notable.
Did Kavari Russell leave early? Didn't he leave early?
Yes, but I don't know that he had an option to come back, because his missed year was because of the suspension.
Gotcha.
And I don't know. Notre Dame doesn't often give fifth year. I don't know if Notre Dame gives fifth years for that. NCAA wise, he could have come back for a fifth year, but I don't know that Notre Dame wise he could have, because he played as a freshman, junior, and senior. And he missed 2014 because of that suspension BS. And I'm trying to think. No other. I can't think of any other corners that could have come back that you would have wanted back at that point in time. No linebackers. That's a good. I feel like I'm thinking of a running back that left early that shouldn't have, and I'm drawing a blank. Well, let me ask you this, right? What did you think of Kyron leaving early? Did you think it was time? Did you think it's like he's got a lot of tread on his tires? Yeah. He should have gone pro.
Yeah.
Because how much better was he going to get in 2022?
I mean, he wasn't going to run any faster in the testing and everything, right? And now he's a starting running back in the NFL, and he gets an extra year on his tires. So I have zero issue with
I think,
Tyron carried the load for 2 years. I mean, he had some
yeah,
large
that's what I was going to say,
numbers.
Ryan. He had a lot of totes at Notre Dame
Yep.
in those 2 years. I mean, he had 204 carries plus 42 catches in 2021. That's 250. He had 246 touches the year before, 244 and 246. So you're talking about a guy that had about 500 touches in 2 years on a small frame.
Yep.
That's a lot of touches. So I didn't have a problem with it. Now, did I think he was going to get drafted very high? No. But how much was his stock going to improve if he came back for another year?
No,
His
I
numbers
think
would have
his
been
stock
better, but
was.
I don't know his stock would have improved much.
I wanted him to test better. I think if he would have tested better, he would have gone a little bit higher, maybe like late third, fourth round, somewhere in that ballpark. But once he ran the 4.6, it was just like,
And
all
that
right,
wasn't going to change if he came
yeah,
back for another year.
exactly. Yep.
He still would have been a 4.6, but now he's got 700 touches on his resume.
Yep.
And especially for a guy like, I don't know if they would be as concerned about Audric Estime having that kind of mileage because he's 230 plus pounds. When you're talking about a kid that's barely 200 pounds, that's going to be a little bit more concerning, I would think, for teams.
Yeah.
It would be for me anyway.
Yeah. Brandon Plesner, well, who's your comp for Deuce Knight? Is he similar to Hendon Hooker or someone else? I think you've done the Hendon Hooker comp
Yeah.
before. So
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of
I've
sense
seen
for his body
people
type.
use Michael Penix, but I think the only comparison with Michael Penix is they're left-handed. That's it. I mean, that's really the only one I see.
Penix is a
they're
good
left-handed.
athlete, but he's not Deuce Knight as an athlete.
No,
Like I don't see that
exactly.
one at
Hendon
all.
Hooker's a very good athlete,
He is,
and Deuce is even more dynamic athletically. The other thing too is Hendon had a very strong downfield arm in college. I think Deuce compares favorably, and I also think Penix has a little bit of a funky throwing motion. It's not a natural
Shot puts
throwing
a little
motion.
bit. Yeah.
Where Deuce and Hendon had a little bit more cleaner release, but Hendon's also got very long arms like Deuce does. And so I thought Hendon actually had a pretty good throwing motion when you consider how long he was. So Hendon Hooker's the one that I've always gone with. And also too, they're very similar in high school because Hendon was a guy that had the tools, but was still just needed work coming out of high school. He wasn't as talented as Deuce was, but he had talent. Notre Dame recruited him out of high school.
He was a 110 high hurdler, and he was actually a really good 110 high hurdler. But,
yeah. So that's the one that makes him. And he was smart, and Deuce is smart. And that's the thing is, I think Deuce gets kind of thrown into this dual threat quarterback thing for good reason, just like Hendon did. But Deuce has. I didn't see Hendon turning into what he was. I always thought Hendon was better than Justin Fuente thought he was. I loved him at Virginia Tech. But, Ryan, I did not see him going to Tennessee and doing what he did at Tennessee. I could see Deuce doing that. You know what I mean? If he is developed properly. So, yes, the college – the athleticism is similar to high school Hendon. The college projection is very similar to Tennessee Hendon, if that makes sense. Do you have any other comps that jump out to you, Ryan? I know you only like doing it if it really jumps out to you.
He's got a very unique like body type and stuff too, which I think kind of like I'm a big body type comp guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he's got kind of that slender frame. I think I saw Brendan Plesner play like Malik Cunningham. Malik Cunningham was like 5'11". Like he's not.
Yeah,
I don't see
no.
that one.
And Malik Cunningham was an athlete. He wasn't a quarterback, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Hendon, I mean, if you wanted to compare him to a Louisville quarterback, I'd say Lamar Jackson's about the closest thing you could find, and I wouldn't compare anyone to Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
But as far as because Lamar had a natural throwing ability to his game that I've always talked about. I mean, he was a 3,000-yard passer in back-to-back years under Bobby Petrino. Malik Cunningham threw for 1,500 yards last year. Like I know he threw for 29 the year before, 19 touchdowns. I mean, he was an athlete playing quarterback. He was. The Lamar was more of an athlete that was a quarterback. And I think Deuce is more of that. He's an athlete who is a quarterback, not an athlete that's learning to be a quarterback. So I don't love the Malik Cunningham one. I really do feel like there's not going to be a better one, in my opinion, than Hendon Hooker. Not just because I thought of it. Somebody just mentioned this one, Ryan, to the previous question. Josh Adams is an interesting one. I understand why Josh left. I just didn't think he should have. Yeah. I just thought he should have come back for 2018. But I also understand tread on the tires. He'd played a lot of football. I
Mhm.
get it, but I thought he made a mistake because
Yeah,
he should have come back. Could you imagine that 2018 team with Deuce and with Dexter and Josh?
been pretty good.
Yep.
We had Eric Santini says, I saw an updated comp for CJ Carr was Brock Purdy. Thoughts on that? I don't hate that
No,
at all. I
no,
see
I
it.
don't. Not
I can
not
see
the
it.
college version of it. I don't like that
I
one.
mean, but like body type, similar, athleticism in the pocket, similar, arm, similar.
Yeah,
I think it makes a lot of sense.
yeah, I don't
You're
love
not
that
predicting
one.
success. I'm just talking about
Yeah,
physical profile. Like
I
I
get.
could see
Oh, I
it.
get what you're saying. I get what you're saying for
Yeah.
the success part, Ryan. Body type is about where I can go with you on that.
You
I
don't think
don't
there's
like
similar
that.
athletes in the pocket? Like, yeah, and
I
they
think
move
CJ's a better
well in the
athlete in the
pocket.
pocket. I think
Oh, I
I
don't
think
think
Brock's
that
a
at
nice
all.
quarterback.
I don't
I
think
do.
that at all.
I
Yeah,
do.
all right.
I do. No, I don't love that one. Trying to think of another one for CJ Carr because I could understand why somebody would want to have the pushback to the Joe Burrow comp that I've made because again, it's more style of play than it is specific skill set. But I don't know that if Brock Purdy would be the one that I would feel feel like going to.
Kay Grant with the super chat. Thank you so much, Kay Grant. Getting back into the routine of things after losing 2 family members. I'm so sorry to hear that. This
Yeah.
community is incredible, and I'm thankful for IB. Go Irish, beat Pitt.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Kay Grant at the last tailgate when all that stuff was going on, man. So I'm glad to see you back. Definitely glad to see you back, and I'm glad you're coming through it all, man. Are you? I'm just curious if you're going to be at the tailgate tomorrow. I'd be very curious about that. Love to talk to you. Let's see here. Let's get to last two, Ryan, and this will be we're going to end with a super chat, and then we'll have this one. This is the one from earlier. So I'm going to read this one, Ryan, and you can address
Yep.
it from PK because you guys were kind of talking about it a little bit before the show. PK
Sure.
says Derek Meadows is now listed by some at 6'7". Do you worry about getting another tight end or another wideout who will not be able to separate regardless of coaching? So Ryan, I want you to address this in two parts. First, the part about the 6'7", and then the second part of the question.
I mean, one, I don't think that from everything I've seen, I don't know where the 6'7's coming from, but Derek Meadows certainly doesn't look 6'7 to me. But that's just kind of my eyes. So, and I've seen him listed mostly at 6'5". So I don't know if he's actually 6'7". PK, my biggest conversation before, because again, I understand where this is coming from. I just think that there is a big misnomer about like the size to separation thing, because I think most fans think of separation one way: route runners, in and out of bricks. That's the way they separate. And when I grade for NFL for the NFL draft, I grade 3 different areas of separation. And that's not even all the areas of separation that you can have. There are different type of separators. Just because you are a bigger guy doesn't mean that you can't separate, because you can not only separate as a route runner or getting in and out of breaks, kind of those loose hips, you can also separate with just pure being fast, vertical speed. Guys can get on top of guys. When you're in one-on-one coverage, you're able to beat a man to a spot. That's a way to separate. You can also separate by being tall and having length to you. Like, separating in the air is a skill. That is a form of separation. Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss jumping up very high in the air and plucking a ball out of the air. They separated from the defender to win that area. So I don't like throwing guys into every bucket, because there are some tall guys that are good route runners that can get in and out of breaks. And two, I think that we just need to understand that there are different types of separators. I don't think that we can just coin, not everybody is Danny Amendola and Wes Welker, and that's the only way you can separate. There are completely different body types and completely different ways to separate in an offense.
I'll add to it, Ryan, also is, have you seen Derek Meadows? There's nothing about that kid that screams tight end body type. I mean, he's pretty
Yeah.
skinny.
Yeah. You can
And,
also
like,
run.
yeah. And, I used the example earlier for for Johnny Wilson, and I get PK's response. Like, he's a bit of an anomaly. And I've always said in the past, the exception doesn't make the rule, but it does when you look at the specific skill set. And he's
Yep.
not the only tall wide receiver that's been a pretty good college football player. I think of Devin Fuentes, who was a wide receiver at Michigan. I think he was. I think did he play where
Funchess?
Did he play tight end? Funchess, yes. Did he play
Yeah.
tight end in the NFL? What did he do in the NFL, Ryan? Did he play tight end or
He was
did
a
he
wide
still stay a
receiver. He
receiver?
was a wide receiver in the NFL.
He was a bigger type of guy and was a good football player. We saw Colin Johnson from Texas a couple years ago, was a 6'6", slightly plus, I think, kid. He was definitely 6'6". He was a pretty good football player in college. He was a guy that certainly could have is a comp. He was a good, and I think Derek Meadows is a more explosive athlete than him. So we've seen plenty of guys that are those 6'6" type of players that are good football players. Because to your point, a 6'6" guy or a 6'7" guy in this situation, which again, neither of us think that he's that tall, they don't have to gain 3, 4, 5 yards of separation every time.
Yeah.
It's just a different deal because you're going to be now. There's certain routes that you're not going to ask that guy to run, and that's part of it too.
And I just think Meadows, because like I have, like if I think there's some concerns over Derek Meadows, one from a production perspective and one from a hand strength perspective, right? But like he is tall and can run. He is going to create some separation. There's no doubt. I have questions if he can finish plays consistently, but that's a different conversation.
Right. Here's another one, 6'6" guy that was a dynamic big play guy, Hakeem Butler from Iowa State. Remember him? He was 1,000-yard, 20+ per catch guy. He wasn't a guy who was out there looking like Cooper Kupp as a route runner. But he didn't need to be because he was like 6'6", 225, and he could run.
4.47,
you know?
yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. And to me, you could say all you want, we need speed guys. That is to me such a, I'm trying to say this where it doesn't come across disrespectful because I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
Guy. I mean,
but
you don't have to say
he ran a 4.5 flat at Notre Dame's camp. But my whole point is, even if he wasn't, to say we need speed guys so you don't take anyone that's not a speed guy is just not a realistic way to build a depth chart.
But he is
yes, Notre Dame needs to continue adding more speed to the roster, but like not everyone has to be Cam Williams, because then what do you do when you play that team that can guard a guy like Cam Williams? Right? You need bigger guys. You need guys that you need a mix of everything. You need guys that can be vertical players. You guys can do things after the catch. You don't need a bunch of guys that can do everything, because you know what is even more rare than a 6'7" guy? A roster that has 7 dudes that do the exact same thing and do everything, right? It's just not realistic. And Ryan, to your point, Derek Meadows is absolutely a fast guy. Absolutely a fast guy.
I mean, my question would be like, the body type stuff, right? Like Equinemius St. Brown, he was 6'5". He was a long guy. Did he not create separation vertically? Like he ran by dudes all the time. I don't know.
Right. And his comment is like, well, he hasn't caught a lot of passes and no offers from SEC, Big Ten, or ACC. Okay, first of all, if you want to talk offers, there's not an offer right now that really matters a whole lot more to me for a West Coast kid than Washington. And Washington wants him. Okay. Number 2, we're not beating down the drum for Derek Meadows has to be that guy. We've said all along, right? He's a raw kid. He's got some boomer bust to him. You take a kid like that as part of a 3 to 4 man receiving corps because the tools are raw. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have to take a bunch of cookie cutters. And if you're going to say if you want to beef about Derek Meadows and say, hey, man, I don't know that I love that kid because he doesn't catch the ball very well, I'd say fair. He's not as productive as the talent would dictate. Fair. Okay. He doesn't have this offer, that offer. Fair. But that's not what you said. You said he's going to have trouble separating and you need speed guys. That's the last thing that I would say I'm going to beef about with Derek Meadows. The last thing. There are other legitimate things that you can be concerned about why Ryan and I view him as a bit of a boomer bust type of guy. Because I could see him going to college and being a 20 catch per catch guy. And I could see him going to college and never really being anything, because there's this one trait that to me trumps all others. Because if you don't have it, it doesn't matter that you have all the others. And that's, can you catch? And I don't know that he can catch like you need a guy to catch. But if speed is going to be your beef, then and now you're moving the goalposts with the conversation, right? We're not arguing about this other stuff that you're now saying. We're saying that to look at a kid that's 6'6" or 6'7" and automatically assume A, that he's a tight end, and B, that he can't separate with speed It's just a poor evaluation on your part. That's simple as that.
If Derek Meadows doesn't turn out to be a good college receiver, it's not going to be because he can't separate. So that is not going to be the reason that he doesn't separate.
Which was the original conversation, right?
Yeah.
That was the original conversation. Now, if you want to say he can separate, but he drops balls, okay, we can have that conversation. That's a fair one, right? And so, but as far as a group of 3 or 4 receivers, yeah, if Derek Meadows is one of those guys, yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. Because you can't teach 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", 4.5 flat speed as a junior in high school, 4.5 flat at Notre Dame. And Ryan, as you have seen, Notre Dame doesn't exactly have a fast track.
No,
they don't.
They do not. They do
and
not.
So that's impressive to me. But the other stuff you're complaining about, we've never disagreed on that. We've never said this is a polished kid that's going to come in and play right away, and he's a top 50 kid. No, we've never said that. We've always been honest. He's tall, he's really fast, doesn't catch well, not a great route runner. Production is still a work in progress. Simple as that. So we're there with you on that part. And then here's the last one, Ryan, that we'll get to before we get out of here.
Tyler Evans, any upsets this weekend? I'm actually looking up some games as we
going through it now. I'll tell you what, Ryan, if I knew that Jalen Daniels was going to play and he's not, and he was healthy, I could see Kansas upsetting Oklahoma. I really like that offense when he plays, but they're just such a different team when he doesn't play. They really are. So I have a tougher time with that one. But Kansas is such a Jekyll and Hyde team. They really are. Like, they look great one week. They blew UCF out 2 weeks ago. And that's sandwiched right in between losing to Oklahoma State, who got blown out by South Alabama, and getting blown out by Texas. So they're a very weird team. But I don't have a lot of faith in Jason Bean winning that game. But I'll tell you this, I would love to be wrong on that one.
Yeah,
because I would like to see that one. Like, I mean, I don't see Florida beating Georgia. I don't count Utah beating Oregon as an upset, even though Oregon's basically a touchdown favorite. I don't count that as an upset. Duke, Louisville. I mean, USC better figure some stuff out, or Cal could jump up and bite them if that team just isn't ready to play. And there was a question that I didn't pull up, Ryan. Have you heard what's kind of going on with Lincoln Riley? Who's missed the last 2 practices because of a quote unquote illness.
Yeah,
so that's a weird thing. So I would kind of keep my eye on that Cal USC game. This would be considered an upset because one team is ranked and the other one's not, but it wouldn't be an upset to me. I'd actually be more shocked if Tennessee beats Kentucky than the other way around. Tennessee's a 3.5-point favorite in that game at Kentucky, which kind of surprises me a little bit.
I think Kentucky's losing its luster a little bit recently in the last couple of weeks.
They lost 2 really good football teams.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting. I don't know what Tennessee's done to make anyone think they should be a road favorite over a 5-2 team. Vandy's not beating Ole Miss. Colorado at UCLA. I was a little surprised by that 17-point spread, but man, UCLA has exactly the kryptonite defense to Colorado, which is they got a front that can get after the quarterback. And if they can protect Shedeur Sanders, they could pull that upset off. But I don't see them having any chance of protecting Shedeur Sanders against that defense right now.
No.
Arizona beating Oregon State, that's possible. I guess that's probably be the closest thing I'd see to an upset, Ryan, would be that.
UCF is a 7-point favorite against West Virginia. I wouldn't be surprised if West Virginia beats UCF. That's just one that popped to me. Looking at spreads here, I don't know.
2 unranked teams. Stanford's not beating Washington. Wisconsin, Ryan, you think Wisconsin? I don't think they do. Do you think Wisconsin has any chance against Ohio State? I don't believe that they do.
No, they stink.
Yeah, I don't either. Especially with they don't have their starting quarterback, and he wasn't even that good. But they're down to their backup quarterback now. NC State hosting Clemson. I'm curious to see how that's a 10-point favorite. I'm curious to see how Clemson responds mentally and emotionally to that loss last week. It's going to be a very interesting one. Yeah, I don't really just. I don't see any others that jump out at me, Ryan. I don't. I really don't. See Pac-12. We talked about those. Arizona maybe over Oregon State. Oregon State's only a 3-point favorite, though. Yeah, it's only a 3-point favorite. That wouldn't even be a huge upset. Arizona's an they're a gritty team, man. He's doing a nice job there. Doing a nice job there.
Yes.
All right. So if you had to pick one upset, Ryan, that you're going to say, this is my upset of the week. Do you have one?
West Virginia over UCF. That's my pick. 7-point underdogs there.
Yep. Sounds good.
Oh, I here's one. Rice over Tulane. I'll give that one a shot. Rice over Tulane.
Sounds good. That'd be a nice one. He's doing a decent job there. Bloomgren, he's still their head coach, right? The guy from Stanford.
I don't know. I just know they got JT Daniels at quarterback now. So
there you go. There you go. Well, that'll do it, Ryan. Let's go ahead and take us out of here, man.
Yep. Appreciate everyone for joining us today. If you missed the first section of this podcast, we talked about Notre Dame versus Pitt, keys to victory, and a little bit of game predictions. Gave out some potential game balls, some headlines there as well. Then we hit the mailbag, obviously. So before you leave, please, if you could do us a solid, hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification bell. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, leave a 5-star review. Go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. We'll have further intel coming soon to you all from a recruiting perspective. Already some team intel dropped this week on the board, so make sure you go to that. We're only a couple days from kickoff, folks. Get excited. We'll talk to you next time here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.